Hey, Alexander. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Beautiful day again in London. Beautiful sunny weather. What do they say? Glorious summer made glorious by this sun. And of course, this is from Shakespeare, and it reminds me of the events in Cornwall, because what we saw there at the G7 was a great deal less than glorious. But there it is.
All right. How's everyone doing? Welcome to another live. Hello, Vasya. Hello to all from South Africa. Hello to everyone in South Africa. What is going on in South Africa? What's the latest from South Africa? From Essex, St. Petersburg, Ayo Petropoli. Peter, as they say in Russia.
Absolutely.
All right. Alan, how you doing, Alan? Good to see you here. Hello from Serbia, Alexander. How are you? Hello, Scott in Ukraine. What's happening in Ukraine? What is going on in Ukraine? Alexander, what is up in Ukraine?
Lots of things.
How about Australia? Is Australia still in lockdown? What's going on there?
Well, it seems slightly. And of course, we're having our own, not exactly, a semi-lockdown.
I called it.
Yeah,
I called it.
Extended by a month.
Yeah, I said they're going to rebrand everything, and they're going to put the Greek alphabet letters there, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. They've put all those letters for the new variants, Alexander, and bam, you guys are another month.
Absolutely, yeah. If it may continue longer, of course.
And you know who the new spokesperson is?
No,
now that Gates is gone. Who I think it is? I think it's Tony Blair.
Well,
he's all over the place.
He is all over the place all of a sudden. No, I know. It is quite astonishing to see how he's suddenly resurfaced, actually.
The media loves him.
The
entire world hates him. The media loves him.
I know. Most people in Britain don't like him or hate him. I mean, only it's the North London set, out of which most of the political class and the media come, that adore him, and which have never really got over him. They still imagine that he's the sort of perfect leader, and he is the person who matches their own feelings about the world.
Yeah. All right. So, Alexander, let's get rolling. Let's get rolling. Hello to everyone in Germany, Netherlands, Italy. Did a lot of shows on Italy. Daytona Beach. Fantastic. Florida, Canberra. Great. Let's get rolling. Good day to everyone, wherever you are in the world. We got a lot to cover. We're going to be taking calls. I'll put the link up for the calls in like 5-10 minutes. And the topic today, of course, Alexander, is Biden road tour, Biden's world tour. The road tour. He's the traveling rock band, and he's in the UK, finishing up the UK. Actually, I think he left.
I think he has. I think he's. I think he's on his way to Brussels. Now.
Brussels.
Yeah,
he's off to Brussels, and then he's off to Geneva.
That's right for the big star turn. That's going to be very interesting.
All right, well, just get into it. G7, NATO, and then the Putin meeting.
Yeah, I've just done a program about the G7 meeting, and I have to say, I mean, it was a summit that we were all expecting would come up with all kinds of ideas. I mean, we didn't quite know how it would turn out, and I think it's been a shambles, an absolute shambles, a mumbled statement criticizing, not even criticizing, sort of gently tapping China on the wrist, because the Europeans don't want to criticize China, a really nasty set of comments about Russia, which are completely contradictory, want predictable and stable relations on the one hand, go out of your way to insult it on the other, woolly comments about climate change, woolly comments about the pandemic, a commitment to keeping the foot even further on the accelerator on the economic front, and a disastrous press conference at the end from the star of the show, all of which is being riffed by an elegant row between Monsieur Macron and Prime Minister Johnson about sausages and Ireland. So, I mean, it was really actually a very, very strange summit, in truth. I mean, I have to say G7 summits have never impressed for a very long time now. But this one was, I think, even in that category really stands out. I mean, it was very weird.
Yeah, it was a disastrous G7, if you want my opinion. Disastrous G7.
I think so. I think so. I mean, the Chinese media is in a state of absolute euphoria about it. They're laughing. They put together. There's a really, actually, rather, I think, unpleasant cartoon for various reasons. I think, I mean, I didn't like it at all, but ridiculing the G7 summit by making a joke based on Leonardo's Last Supper. But the implication was, and that's the key thing to understand, it is the Last Supper. So what the Chinese are in effect saying through that cartoon is that this is the last time the G7 will have come together, and it will impress. It's in its final days.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very unimpressive G7. The mainstream media in the US and the UK, they're trying to spin this as some sort of, once again, it was the Build Back Better, some sort of Build Back Better, America is back kind of thing. But I mean, it was an absolute disaster. And
I mean, ocean of cliches, which, as I said, can't hide the fact that the substance is absolutely hollow and the delivery is absolutely terrible. I mean, there isn't one effectively.
It's very clear, Alexander, and we'll get to calls right after I ask you this, so you can get into this. It's very clear now why the Biden press team, the PR team, the White House doesn't want to do a joint press conference with Putin. I mean, it's crystal clear now. Biden, when he goes off script, and he does it often. For some reason, he believes he can go off. I don't know what gets into his head. He believes that he can just, just free flow it. When he goes off script, it is an absolute freaking train wreck. I mean, a train wreck. Libya, Syria. He was mumbling, gibberish. Absolutely. I mean, it's clear now why they want to try to control the Putin-Biden summit as much as possible, because all of these gaffes that were going on, it was all under friendly fire.
Absolutely.
I'm sure every leader, I'm sure, was very well briefed by the by the White House Communications Department as to the real situation of things. I have no doubt that they were all briefed, and this was friendly fire. So it's crystal clear why they're going to try to control the Geneva summit as best as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a terrible press conference. I mean, he gets Libya and Syria mixed up. He talks about extraditing people to Russia, a request Putin has never made, by the way, and which he seems oblivious to the fact that the US constitutional system doesn't permit it. I mean, it was just weird and, uncompleted sentences, weird changes, rambling, strange trains of thought that never seem to lead anywhere. I mean, put that up against Putin in a joint press conference. I mean, Putin is incredible. I mean, this is a man who's able to talk and take questions for 4.5 hours, even longer sometimes. Field questions, all his facts at his fingertips, incredibly structured. I mean, he would just blow, in a press conference, he would just blow Biden away. Now, what's going to happen behind the scenes when the two meet? I mean, that's another question again. But I mean, the optics would have been terrible if there'd been a joint press conference. So they're not going to have one. And this has been the story of this administration right the way through. You don't want to expose the president to difficult questions. And you're, by the way, absolutely right about difficult questions, because so long as it's the White House press corps and the European media, up to a certain point, you can control them. But of course, if it's the Kremlin press corps, then it's different. They could ask all kinds of questions, and that would be very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crystal clear what's going on. I actually don't think that this summit is that much to do with policy on the U.S. side of things. I think they want to try to paint some sort of narrative. I don't know whose idea this is, but someone wants to paint some sort of narrative of Biden standing up to Putin. And I think Trump, the specter of Trump is really making them nervous. So they're trying to create some sort of media spin. And someone thought that a summit with Putin would be a good idea. And I think they really misstepped this one.
Well, I think it was decided upon in an enormous hurry, because it looked in April like there might be a war in Ukraine, which Ukraine would lose, and that would have been a disaster. So they had to find some quick way of stopping that. And so they got the president to call Putin and tell him, please de-escalate. and we're looking for de-escalation in general and a predictable and stable relationship, and let's have a summit meeting to talk things through. So it was, I think, something that was decided on in a great hurry without any real proper preparation and any real plan. And this has been a problem because apparently the US has not really come up with any very clear agenda. The Russians have been pressing the Americans for an idea about what they want to discuss at this Geneva summit. And the Americans haven't really come up with very much. And I did a program, which has appeared on my channel, about how Washington Examiner has been talking about various US officials, including Jake Sullivan, who is Biden's national security advisor. And to the extent that there is a grand plan, it seems to be to threaten the Russians with sanctions if they don't do as the West wants, and at the same time to bribe them with vast amounts of money from the infrastructure funds if they break with China, which of course the Russians, I mean, if they're going to be confronted with that, then they're going to be incredibly angry and very offended. Being the Russians, they will probably not show it. They will come up with their own, Sphinx-like expressions of interest, and they will try and draw this thing out because that's their interest to do. But in secret, in private, they will be fuming. And we're going to get all kinds of angry comments when the Russians return to Moscow from people like Lavrov. And it's highly likely that Putin will be off to Beijing in a few weeks. So that's what this is setting itself up for. But as I said, they didn't really come up with any kind of plan, except, as I said, threaten the Russians and bribe them in order to get them to break from Beijing, which isn't going to happen.
Yeah, we called all of this a week ago.
Yeah.
Week and a half ago. We've called everything how it's playing out exactly the way we said it's going to play out. This is a train wreck. We'll see. We'll see if they can stop the damage that's about to occur, because there's going to be a lot of damage if Biden goes into this summit meeting. From what we saw from the G7, if he goes in looking the way he looks in the G7, it's going to be a freaking train wreck.
Absolutely. Can I just finish one further point, which is, of course, it exposes the reality of what this great $40 trillion so-called infrastructure program to rival China's Belt and Road Initiative is. It is an EU-style slush fund. It's intended to sort of bribe people like the Russian president to get him to break with Beijing. I mean, it will work in some places, to be clear about that. You offer dangle money in front of some people in the global south, they will take it. They might not necessarily do what you want, but they will take it. But of course, with the Russians, it's not going to work at all. And already that makes this great infrastructure program, which, if you actually go into the details, there aren't any really, but already it makes it look tawdry and ineffectual and somewhat sleazy.
Yeah, I agree. It's let's do I have some more things to say. Let's do a super chat here real quick, and then we'll get to the calls right away. Valies coming through with the $20 super chat. Thank you, Valies, the great Valies. We really appreciate it. From JJHW, a £5 super chat. In response to Macron's comments about Northern Ireland, perhaps we should make Calais British again. It would certainly solve the migrant issue. It would solve the migrant issue. What do you make of the row between Macron and Johnson?
Well, I've done a video. I mean, partly it is a case of Macron trolling Johnson. Obviously, it is. I mean, the two have had an odd relationship. At times, they've worked together quite successfully. At other times, they've been having spats against each other. But I think, and this is, I think, the underlying point. It's not just Macron. The Macron obviously is the outlier because he takes it to the most outrageous level, implying that Northern Ireland isn't part of the United Kingdom. He tried to row that back, but he did that in a way that the British would find even more insulting by saying, well, he didn't mean the United Kingdom, he meant Britain, as if the two are somehow distinct. But what he's actually doing, what the Europeans are actually doing, is they are creating problems within Northern Ireland. People there who are Protestants are becoming increasingly restive and very angry. And when they hear the French president casting doubt upon whether Northern Ireland is part of the UK, that's going to make them even more worried and even more angry. And that is creating destabilization, which is exactly what the Europeans say they don't want to see. Now, I'm going to say this. I said this in a program that I've again just done on my channel, which is that before very long, some people in London are going to start thinking that what the European Union is actually up to is that it is deliberately trying to destabilize Northern Ireland, that it is deliberately trying to create trouble in Northern Ireland in order to embarrass Johnson and weaken Britain and somehow create trouble for Britain, because, of course, Britain has left the EU. Now, if that happens, then I can assure you relations between Britain and the EU will get much worse than they are already. And, of course, if Northern Ireland is destabilized, that could have all sorts of very dangerous spillover effects, both in Britain and in Ireland itself. Not just Northern Ireland, but the whole of Ireland, which remains, the Republic of Ireland remains in the EU. So this is reckless, incendiary talk, which needs to stop. As I said, I believe that before very long, this problem will solve itself anyway, because left to itself, I think the trajectory is that inevitably and eventually Northern Ireland will become part of the Irish Republic. It will rejoin the Irish Republic. That this has to happen with the consent of the people there over time. If you try and create destabilization, what you're more likely to get instead is conflict. It's the European Union doing exactly to Northern Ireland what they've done previously to places like Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, GEC 812, welcome. Good to have you here. That's exactly what they want to do. We also said this a long time ago.
Yeah.
The last thing they want to see, the European Union, is a successful Brexit.
Absolutely.
If they see a successful Brexit, then their thinking is other countries might get the same idea. And they might say, you know what? If we exit the EU, the world doesn't fall apart. The sun will rise. Everything doesn't crumble, which is what a lot of countries think. A lot of people in a lot of countries, and I include Greece there and Cyprus, a lot of people who live in Greece and Cyprus think that if we exit the EU, everything falls apart. Everything.
Exactly.
That's what they think. They think it's going to be like an apocalypse, a complete disaster.
But
And it's not.
exactly.
And if they see the UK exiting the EU and it's fine, maybe it's prospering, that's a great fear for the technocrats in Brussels.
Absolutely, it's a terrifying fear. And in fact, can I just say, the economic figures at the moment, I've just seen some of the trade figures between the EU and Britain, and they're holding up perfectly well. I mean, all the talk of disaster that people were talking about, it's not materializing at all. In fact, British exports to the EU have actually increased slightly. So, I mean, it's not the cataclysm. But that's, of course, what they want to promote. The idea that they want to promote that disaster is around the corner. So you can't create disaster on the trade front, which might affect you. You create disaster in another way. But of course, creating conflict is a reckless and irresponsible thing to do. And if that is the agenda, they should stop it, because it will blow back in their faces in a hideous way. Don't forget, Ireland itself is part of the European Union. And if they want a conflict on EU territory, well, they will get one.
Yeah. All right. Let's do one more super chat and we'll get to the calls. Hey man, 699 super chat. Thank you very much for that. Teodoro, 1999 super chat, super sticker. Thank you very much for that. And Mark Hewitt wants to know, £5 super chat. Do you think Bojo's gender neutral recovery may start more plotting in the Tory party?
It wouldn't surprise me, but I'm going to make a guess, which is that his extremely strong responses to Macron and to the pressure from the EU that he got into the G7 is going to rally support to him, both within the Tory party and outside amongst the people who voted Conservative in the election. The G7 summit has actually strengthened him politically. That's my own opinion. And it's interesting to see how, at the moment, the opinion polls, the Conservative lead continues to grow.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring in our first caller, James. I am going to add you to the stream, James. You're on deck.
Good afternoon.
How you doing? Good afternoon.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
I was thinking about what you were saying about Biden and the terrible mismatch between him and Putin. It makes me think when they would have been setting this up, when they would have been laying the groundwork, and the Biden's people would have been in touch with the Russians. What would the Russians be thinking? Like they can't have a press conferences. All of these, the weakness that the American side is showing is astonishing. It's like there's this decrepit old man in charge in the White House. What would the Russians be thinking about their adversaries? The wrong word, but it blows my mind that whoever the people that allowed this to take place, the message they're sending to their strategic rivals is one of fundamental weakness.
Yes, I completely agree. And this is what's so bizarre about this, James, because there's even been a statement from the US, from President Biden himself, that he thinks that, if he meets with Putin, he could somehow project strength, and that's something that Putin respects. Well, I mean, it's going to achieve the exact opposite. And you're already actually seeing this appearing in Russian statements. They're not impressed by what they've seen. I mean, what they came to this summit, by the way, the Russians, as they always do. Always, when you deal with the Russians, you have to be very prepared, because they invariably are. That's an iron law of dealing with the Russians, both on a business level, which I've done, and on a political level, which I haven't done, but which I know about. And that is, they've come with a very definite agenda. They want to end the diplomatic expulsions. They want the diplomats of the various countries to return. They want their diplomatic property restored. They want movement on strategic arms, and they want movement on Ukraine. And they made all that very clear. They made that very clear that that is what they want to see. They're not going to get any of that from Biden. They're going to get this bizarre, weird talk and these mixture of strange threats and bribes, which, as I said, will simply enrage them. But what they're going to do, and what they have been doing over the last few weeks, is that they're going to string the US along. They're going to give the impression that they're receptive to some of this, because in the meantime, it suits them. They get Nord Stream 2 out of the way. They prevent more sanctions being imposed over the next few weeks and months. But in the meantime, they're going to work away harder sorting out their own affairs, about sorting out their preparations for the disconnection from SWIFT, which they know is coming. But what this will do is they will make them see that they're dealing with a hollow US, but one which is also incapable of coming to terms with them in any kind of constructive way.
It really just makes me think that, okay, Biden is a bit of a hollow shell, but even the people underneath him just seem to be extraordinarily bad at their jobs.
No. Yes. I mean, again, see, if you watched Blinken's performance against the Chinese at Anchorage, it was painful to see. Yes. And I gather, again, one gets this from Russian sources, that in private, all the discussions have been conducted in private, but the discussions between Jake Sullivan, who's Biden's national security advisor, and Patrushev, who's Putin's national security advisor, have been similar. Russians are constantly pushing. They always push in negotiations. They always come incredibly well briefed, as I said. They always push. They want to crystallize what the US comes across. And apparently they're not getting anywhere. And they're becoming increasingly contemptuous and frustrated. And it's creating an impression amongst the Russians that, as I said, the United States isn't sorted out. And it's emphasizing what many people, by the way, not just Russians and Chinese, but many people around the world are saying, which is that this administration really isn't up to very much.
They just seem to have no direction. It's odd, anyway. I mean, you have all the State Department has all these ancient segments within it that have been anti-Russia or pro-Russia, and it's all very kind of Byzantine. But the current people that bubble to the top are just so mediocre. But anyway, I also just wanted to have a talk about the possibility of Marine Le Pen winning the French presidency. And I was wondering, I believe that she last ran in 2016, is that right?
That's right, yes. 2017, I think it was, anyway, whatever.
2017.
Yeah.
And her platform was that she would hold a referendum on leaving the EU. Yeah. And she's walked that back, is that
absolutely? Is that right? It is indeed, and indeed about the euro. I mean, she's walked back an awful lot, and yet I still say that in spite of that, if she wins, it would be a revolutionary event. Not perhaps necessarily because of what she intends to do, because she may just be another politician at the end of the day, but because of what she's come to represent. If people in France vote for what she has come to represent, that will be an event in its own way, as colossal as Brexit was, perhaps given the importance of France, even more important. And it will unleash forces that even a very, very compromised Le Pen, if she is compromised, would struggle to control. That's my own personal view. I mean, I speak as somebody who has some knowledge of France. And by the way, I was reading in the Financial Times recently an article which essentially said the same thing, and which spoke about the growing anger that there is in the French regions and the way in which this is now starting to focus around against Macron. So, you know, it's not an event to be underestimated, almost regardless of what Le Pen herself intends to do from this point forward.
Well, my question is, I mean, let's assume she does win, and the position she's taken on the EU now is a kind of expedient position, and she may intend to degrade the EU from within or something like that. What happens if the Franco-German engine, well, the Franco part breaks off? Germany can run alone. Like what happens?
No, it's an existential crisis. Germany cannot run it alone. I mean, because of the nature, the structure of the European system, the way the European Council works, the way everything works. I mean, you can ignore a veto. I mean, I know that it has happened. You can ignore a veto if it is done by a small country, by say Poland or Hungary. Poland isn't that small, but if Hungary or Greece or a country like that vetoes something, you can pretend that it hasn't happened, and you can publish it on the Europa website and pretend that there was no veto. Bear in mind that most EU decisions don't happen when heads of state and government meet. They happen when the EU ambassadors, the various ambassadors of the member states, meet in a very strange and mysterious committee people don't know much about, called COREPER. That's where most of the votes and most of the decisions are actually made. But if France comes out and opposes a strategy, then it's almost impossible for it to happen. And then you would have a crisis, an existential heart crisis at the heart of the Union, because ultimately the European Union was constructed around a deal done between Germany and France. Even if you go all the way back to the origins of the European Union with the coal and steel agreements that took place in the 50s, it's France and Germany that have always worked on this together. So if France breaks away, the whole thing stops and starts to crumble. I mean, I'm not sure that's what Marine Le Pen's intention is, but bear in mind we're closer to that point than we've ever been.
I just wonder, would Germany be able to gather some other, I don't know, maybe some of the Nordic or Netherlands, gather some other forces? I mean, at one point, there was a sort of, in the early 2000s, there was sort of the Franco-German engine had to include London as well when Blair was in power. And obviously that all fell on a hole. And then it was the Franco-German engine again. I mean, is it possible to reorient?
Well, it is possible in theory, but of course there are problems. I mean, bear in mind that some of the Nordic states, for example, have had rather difficult relations with Germany. I'm not talking now about the history, the old history. I'm talking about the situation today. So, I mean, they would probably feel a bit wary and nervous about being tied into a sort of system in which Germany dominates completely because there's no France and there's no Britain. They might be extremely nervous about that. But as a matter of practical reality, we wouldn't get there anyway, because despite the inability, in my opinion, of the Germans to rally even a significant group of countries behind them, I mean, what would that anyway mean? Would it mean a sort of mini European Union without France, a kind of, greater Germany? I mean, that isn't really a viable option. Germany needs France. It needs France in order to make this thing effective and to make it look like it's a genuine European project instead of, the greater German empire, if you like. So it just is unworkable without France. The Germans know it, by the way, perfectly well. And nobody knows it better than Armin Laschet, who will probably be the German chancellor. He comes from Aachen, and he speaks French, as I understand it. He's got many contacts in France. So he will be extremely nervous and very worried if Marine Le Pen becomes president of France next year.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thanks for having a chat. Much appreciated.
Thank you, James. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye. All right, let's bring in Alan Watson. Alan, I'm going to bring you to the live stream. Alan, how you doing?
Hi, guys.
Hello.
How are you?
Hope you're well. Just 2 points. I'll be brief again. The bullying of Britain, the attempted bullying by the US administration and the EU to get back into the agricultural system in the EU over Northern Ireland was shocking. You mentioned Blair. I think Blair and his friends in the Labour Party and the media are determined to get Britain back into the EU. I'm sure they had something to do with what happened at the G7. How long is this going to go on? Is it going to go on time after time? There's a kind of passive civil war in Britain at the moment. Those that want us back, they haven't accepted the referendum, and those of us who want to get on with life. Unless something gives, this is going to continue for a while. That's the first question. I think the BBC and the Labour Party have a lot to do with this, and the population of Britain is turning against the Labour Party and the BBC in a massive way. It really is quite incredible. My second question is something that I don't know a great deal about, but I'm positive you can help me. It's the petrodollar. Has the petrodollar over the past, say, 20, 30 years had an effect on the sovereignty of the Western democracies, apart from the USA, of course? And has it had a detrimental effect? And are there moves afoot to change it? And what would happen if there was a change and it was no longer the petrodollar, but some other kind of currency? I'll leave it at that. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you.
Alan, you've asked two exceptionally good questions. Like, the first thing to say is you're absolutely right. There is still a pressure. There's continuous pressure for the British to drift back into the EU's arms. And this is what the whole Biden EU thing was. There was clearly an attempt to ambush Johnson at the G7 summit with the business about the Northern Ireland Protocol and with this business about the agricultural regulation. And of course, he's come out fighting. And when you talk about the Labour Party, well, Gordon Brown, who was Tony Blair's successor as a Labour leader and Prime Minister, and who was the last Labour Prime Minister, by the way, and who is, of course, Tony Blair's Chancellor. Well, they had a difficult relationship, but Gordon Brown has come out openly and said that he still wants to campaign for Britain to rejoin the EU. He talks about it openly. And if you spend any time with the Blairites, who are now very much in the ascendant within the British Labour Party, you know that they are completely unreconstructed and unchanged about this. And again, you have put your finger on it, because what they are doing is that they are destroying what is left of the Labour Party. There was this disastrous election result in Hartlepool a few weeks ago. There were those disastrous local election results, and it will continue to accelerate in that way. And it's what we're seeing all across Britain is the Labour Party crumble as it becomes now simply a faction, a Remainer faction that wants to reverse Brexit. It's an incredibly short-sighted approach, very much based upon the prejudices and obsessions of some people in North London, where I live, by the way, and it is complete lack of understanding of feeling in the country as a whole. Boris Johnson, as I said, he was put under pressure at this summit in Cornwall. He came out fighting, and I think it's going to work to his advantage. He's going to come out well from this politically within Britain itself. So it's destroying the Labour Party. It won't drag Britain into the EU because they made a decision to leave, and I don't think they're going to go back on it. And it is creating huge risks in Northern Ireland, and it's destroying the Labour Party in the process. So they're achieving through this obsession the opposite of what I think they're setting out to do. They're going to weaken the Labour Party, which is the vehicle for their control in Britain. They're going to destroy it. And they're going to make sure that Britain's relations with the EU become as bad as possible, so that it's quite probable that in a few weeks, we're going to be in what is in effect a no-deal Brexit situation. Remember all that issue about what a disaster a no-deal Brexit would be? That is where we're now heading at accelerating speed. Now, about the petrodollar was introduced in 1973 at the time of the great oil crisis. What happened then was that up to that point, oil had been priced in gold, and the dollar itself had been linked to gold. In 1971, it became a fiat currency, and in 1973, the United States did a deal with the Saudis whereby it was agreed that oil would be priced in dollars instead of gold. Now, that actually increased the geopolitical power of the United States over its allies, because up to then, countries like France or Germany had been able to pile up gold, which had given them leverage over the United States, because if they ran a trade surplus with the United States, they could insist on the United States paying them in gold instead of dollars, which is what de Gaulle did. And that put the Americans, the United States, in greater difficulties. But oil is not only the world's most widely traded commodity, it is still the single commodity without which an industrial economy cannot work. So people have to buy oil, and they have to hold dollars in order to buy that oil. So in effect, creating the petrodollar consolidated the position of the dollar as the world's reserve currency and strengthened US political and economic leverage over its allies. Now, if the petrodollar ceases to exist, and it is now for the first time under serious challenge, you have one of the big oil producers, big energy producers, which is Russia, which is migrating out of the dollar and which is talking about accepting payments for its oil and gas in other currencies. If that happens, then the entire position of the dollar as the world's reserve currency gets into jeopardy. So it is absolutely central. It has been central to the dollar's position up to now, and it has undoubtedly increased the US's power over its own allies.
Right, thanks very much. That's terrific. I became interested in this recycling of the petrodollar and the effect it had on the sovereignty. It is having an effect on the sovereignty of European countries. We've had all these big investments with recycling the petrodollar into Europe in property, sports, etc. And it seems to be chipping away at the sovereignty of these individual nations. And to put it bluntly, it is globalist.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
To put it bluntly, it's we run this economy, not you governments. And it's a bit frightening. And I was thinking if that could change, maybe it would be for the better, but I'm not sure. What would we have in the place of the petrodollar, say?
Well, that is a huge question. I mean, you'll get lots of people make suggestions about many things. I mean, but certainly the role of the petrodollar is utterly central to understanding the modern world. Without the petrodollar, which, as I said, has consolidated the dollar's position as the world's reserve currency, globalization would have been impossible. Globalization depended on the fact that world commodities, oil, but also other commodities too, grain, for example, copper, whatever, all of these things are traded in dollars. If that gave one country at the central system, which is the United States, an outsized role in the world economy. And as that evolved within the United States itself, it meant that certain people who were in control of the dollar within the United States began to accumulate an enormous amount of power. If you take that all away, if you pull that prop away, globalization as we have known it becomes impossible.
Right. And it makes me think about, I'll be brief, it makes me think about Saudi Arabia and Iran and the Gulf states and what their position is economically. It is going to affect us all. If the Saudi Arabians and Iranians came together, say, and decided to change from the petrodollar, that might have an incredible effect on the world politics and economy.
Oh, absolutely. But as I say, bear in mind that countries that move away from the petrodollar, especially if they're Middle East oil countries, have a habit of being invaded. So, I mean, that's well, you're absolutely right. But as I said, do bear in mind that, as I said, there are risks for people involved in doing that sort of thing.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a really good week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah. Did you see the movie There Will Be Blood, Alexander, with Daniel Day-Lewis?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what would happen if there will be blood if Saudi Arabia decided to drop the petrodollar. That's for sure.
Lots of blood.
Yeah,
blood.
No doubt about that. BD, BEDE, we will add you into the stream. Mm-hmm. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Good. How are you? We can hear you. All good.
So I'm down here in New Zealand again. Good morning. It's quite early here.
Good morning.
Last I mentioned about the Five Eyes in New Zealand being cornered by an irritating US administration, I guess you could say, and incompetent middle management that decided to throw some values into the Five Eyes agreement. What we've actually seen recently is Scott Morrison came to New Zealand, and there's been a bullying campaign against New Zealand to get them to join up against China. And so the government here has sort of joined the action quietly, but not in a way to irritate China. And there's a lot of reasons for that, mainly because the US is just, it's not a big enough market. It's no longer our largest market. Our largest market right now is China. I think it's more Europe and UK are our largest trading partners behind Australia. And then the US is important, but it's now below 50% of all our trade. And so if we join the US action on all these crazy things they've got going on, and we lose access to these markets, I mean, we're doomed. Our economy is doomed. And that brings me to, we've recently had our Anzac Day, and then the US has had their Memorial Day, and they're completely different experiences. So when I was in America, the Memorial Day was almost like a celebration to be military. Like, people like, wow, our militaries are awesome, running around, this is great. These people are like, their worship almost as one of the pillars of the government is the military. But here, our experience with the Australian experience in Gallipoli is it's completely different. But Australia is a little more worshipping, I guess you could say. But for New Zealand, it's much more somber. In every small town in our country, you'll find a memorial to maybe the Boer War, Gallipoli, like the First World War, and then the Second World War. And it's always a very somber experience. And the prime reason for this is because we followed another country into an action in the First World War.
That's exactly right.
And it was under a disastrous British campaign. And basically, we got onto the beach and we got slaughtered. And then from that point forward, no New Zealand army has ever been left under control of another foreign leader ever again. And that's sort of our experience with this. So when it comes to that, and then coming back to Britain wanting to be free again, I've always been perplexed by the downplaying of the Commonwealth and the ready institution that the UK has to enable it to do trade. You've got this ready-made thing. The US is very anti-Commonwealth. The EU's always sort of hated this association Britain's had with all these other countries that it can, trade sort of on its own. What role do you think the Commonwealth could be as a linchpin of alternative trade outside of the US sort of sphere, but still in the Anglophile sphere that we can trade to sort of replace or supplement the potential loss in China and Russia?
Well, logically, the British ought to be looking to their Commonwealth as their major trading and political partners. I mean, when Britain joined the EU back in the 1970s, I was obviously very, very young then, but I remember this was a bitterly argued issue in Britain. Many people in Britain at that time felt very strong attachment to the Commonwealth. There was a very widespread feeling that Britain going into Europe was somehow turning its back on the Commonwealth. There was even talk of betraying the Commonwealth at that time. And some, really, really upset people feeling about this. And you would thought that the decision to turn away from Europe ought to be now followed through by an embrace of the Commonwealth. And maybe that ought to have been the priority at the moment. Maybe the first step the British should have taken would have been to talk to countries like Australia and New Zealand, especially, perhaps also Canada too, perhaps India, perhaps other places within the Commonwealth, South Africa. It would have been an obvious thing to do. But of course, the thing to always say about Britain is that it is still being pulled in two directions, because though I think that there would be some people who would want to embrace that future, there are other people who still want to embrace the European Union because they're still very focused on the European Union and Britain's role in the EU. And actually, there's a third group which really wants to be part of the US, but that also means, in a way, reintegrating with the EU in a kind of way. So these are difficult things for the British to sort out because they're still very divided amongst themselves and they still haven't thought that through out clearly. But you're absolutely right. If it is going to be an economic and trading arrangement between Britain and countries like New Zealand and Australia, it has to be now on a completely different basis from how it worked in the old Commonwealth. I mean, any idea, that Britain could be a kind of elder brother is now an absurd one. And people in Britain also remember Gallipoli, and they also remember it as a disaster. And many people in Britain, those who are familiar with Gallipoli, as many people in Britain are very well aware of the strong feelings that people in Australia and New Zealand have about it, and the way in which they were led to disaster as a result of a British strategy that was ill thought out and badly conceived, and ended in a terrible debacle in which many young men lost their lives. And by the way, your point about a perspective, a fundamental difference between attitudes to military service in the United States and those in places like Australia and New Zealand, and I think this is also true, by the way, of Australia, is absolutely spot on. The United States fought for itself. Australia and New Zealand fought as part of the Commonwealth in a quarrel with other countries that was basically British. And that, of course, changes the perspective radically. And it makes the Australians and the New Zealanders much more careful about war and losses. And it doesn't mean that they are anti-British. I don't get that impression at all. But it does mean that they will certainly not be led into the same into a conflict in the same way. And last but not least, just to finish, your point about trade balances changing and this having an effect on how people see diplomacy and politics, that is also true. Today, Germany's trade with China is almost at the same level as it is with the United States. So and it's rising, whereas its trade with the US is essentially stagnant. So from a German point of view, just as it is with New Zealand and Australia, they don't really want to pitch a quarrel with China, because from their point of view, China is increasingly becoming central to their economy. And that's true in New Zealand, it's true in Australia, it's true in Germany and in Europe as well.
It's, I've went back to university because of the thing. I almost hate that you can't even say words these days. And when I studied history, they're like, oh, you have to be in the moment. And then what things were happening then, when you look back, you never really know how people felt or even what they were talking about. And when we come back 100 years from now, people will go, what do they mean? What was this Kuf and this, West Palestine or West Jordan area, and they refer to, and mid-century Germans? I mean, who are they? Like, what are they referring to there? And it's really frustrating because a lot of people aren't realizing what's going on. And I watched one of your broadcasts recently, and it said, you don't know who's listening. And I have to agree, because podcasts like this are listened to, but you never know by who, and what drifts down or up, in their chain of command. Because I once was on the Cato website. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
Absolutely, very much so.
And I got into an argument. This is maybe in the mid-90s or something, and Helen Clark was our Prime Minister at the time. And I got into a fight with a guy over ANZUS and interpretation of the treaty. And boy, did fireworks start flying, and then 2 days later, Prime Minister was writing on the same thread, and I was like, I better back out of this and thing. And then there were public statements made about New Zealand was a partner in ANZUS and it was still committed to the relationship, and things were important. I thought, okay, so you do need to be careful who's listening, because they are listening and recording everything.
No question.
But hopefully they pick up the good ideas and realize the mistakes, which I think they are. They must listen to. I have an IT background as well, so analyzing social interactions, I guess, has been something that I've been doing recently in the last few years. So they do have software that can listen to what people are talking about and measuring their responses, and then they go, oh, these topics are hot, these people particularly are important, this is their thing, and they can categorize you into different groups. And they know that, okay, if we go to an election or something, here's our top 10 topics, here's the thing we need to talk about. Oh, these ideas seem to be the thing that we could borrow from or take, and these ideas are terrible. But unfortunately, they seem to just love the terrible ideas. And I just think it's a neocon derangement syndrome, or like a post-Clinton administration thing, because those people are all still floating around.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, we have to be aware that people do listen to what we say. How much they learn, I don't know. But the one thing we've been discovering over the last few months, and it's quite interesting, is that the amount of dissent within the system that there actually is. I mean, it was one of the most interesting revelations, because obviously I spent a lot of time on Russiagate, is that, it used to be said that it was 17 intelligence agencies that, reached a consensus on Russiagate.
Oh, don't forget the interagency. That was very important.
Well, it turned out it was just 3, except, of course, that one of them, the National Security, the NSA, didn't really agree with the other 2. And then it turned out that even within the other 2, there were all sorts of people who were dissenting on the conclusions. And that the CIA director, John Brennan, just made sure that all their dissenting opinions were excluded from the intelligence assessments. So, I mean, there are that does go on. There is dissent, but we also have to be realistic about this. This dissent isn't at the moment affecting their decision making. And one of the consequences of dissent, if you have a very ideological perspective on things, is that if you face dissent, if you face resistance, what it does is it makes you very angry. And your inclination at that point is to basically ramp it down. And I'm afraid that's something that all of us are experiencing. It's not, as we've said many times, easy to run a channel like this.
I don't think they ramp down. I think they double down. So
they double down.
An action doesn't go right, they create another conflict. That doesn't go right, well, they double down and they create 2 new things to keep everyone busy. But I'm sort of thinking China and Russia are now stalling the US, and they're going to keep these negotiations sort of going on to keep them occupied. They've obviously got a limited pool of smart stuff, shall we say. I think Iran's picking up on this. We haven't even heard from the Rocket Man. He won't even talk to the Americans. I'm sure. I was just waiting for something to him to say, like, I want to talk to the Orange Man. Bring back the Orange Man. But I guess he's not going to say anything. So they're not getting anything out of him. So I just wondered if there's a coordinated action, do you think, between these 3 powers to sort of keep America occupied and contained, almost in a reversal, like, they can't keep all these fronts balanced, and they're juggling. They can't be here and there, and there's just so much going on. And then I was just waiting for that guy to go to India and just upset Modi, and that would have just made this perfect triangle of like 4 billion people that would have just been upset with the US, and it would have just completely reversed the whole thing. It would all be, everything would be up for grabs.
Well, the Russians and the Chinese do coordinate, and they've said it quite openly. I mean, there's no dispute about that. Now, Iran, I think, is slightly outside, but perhaps it's becoming more involved, and perhaps after the next Iranian election it will become more involved. But coordination does take place. And I actually read a comment by a political leader in one of the Black Sea states. We're not sure which one, but I suspect it's Romania. And apparently he said one of the fundamental differences is that the Russians and the Chinese each play a grand game of chess on one chessboard. In Russia's case, it's in Europe. In China's case, it's the Pacific. Whereas the US is trying to play chess on multiple different boards all at the same time. And that's the difference. And I think that's actually a very hard thing to do.
Yeah. So what would be the depth of the Russian diplomatic corps? So you've got Lavrov. If something was to happen to him, or he was busy, like, is there enough of a intelligent pool close to him or coming up,
Russia has a tremendous tradition in diplomacy. Alex, who comes from a diplomatic background, will tell you there are lots of extremely able people in Russia who would step into Lavrov's shoes if he were to retire, which is possible. And there's a man called Ryabkov, who's a deputy foreign minister. There's Nebenzia, who's in the UN Security Council. There's lots of people ready to slot in if Lavrov goes. In fact, it won't make much difference. I mean, he's an outstanding foreign minister and diplomat, but the Russians have no shortage of them.
Yeah, I'm almost upset that he didn't do the Ukraine thing, because it always seems that whenever there's a leader in Russia who's come from Germany, so we're talking about Peter the Great, Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great took back Sevastopol, Crimea, and then that's what gave her the great thing. She wasn't even Russian, but Putin spent a lot of time in Germany, and then now he's come back and he's ended up being quite well off from having the German experience. I was just thinking, wow, he could have gone and then he would have become Putin the Great. That would have been the title bestowed on him if he was to sort of roll back Ukraine.
I mean, Russians often trade space for time, and I suspect that's partly what they've been doing. I mean, that is very much the nature of Russian policy. I mean, as I said, they always play a long game. Bear in mind that in 2014, they started with very weak cards, but their cards have become much stronger. And that's how the Russians work. They are very incremental. Anyway,
Perfect.
Okay.
Just Cyprus and Crete. One of them is in the Commonwealth, but I can't remember which one, because I saw them at the Commonwealth Games, and I thought, oh, that's weird. I thought they were not.
Greece.
Cyprus or Crete?
Cyprus is a Commonwealth country. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
The British, the British got there too. The Cypriots fought a war of independence against them.
Yeah, 1960.
But, are they friendly Commonwealth or sort of hostile Commonwealth, I guess?
Friendly. There's a lot of look. I mean, it was. I'll say real quick, and I'll leave it at that. I'll say that there is the two sides to the coin. That the empire did do a lot of damage to countries, but it also left a lot of good, and I think that's. And that good that it left was lasting. You see it in Cyprus with our education system, our accounting system, our legal system. It's all British, all of it, from alpha to omega. It's all British from A to Z, and it's what's helped Cyprus have a healthy economy, to be quite honest, and not go the way of Greece.
Yes.
We didn't take the Greek system. We took the British system. So for all the troubles that people may associate with the empire, it did leave a lot of lasting good as well. So it's not all bad. It's not all good. There's two sides to every coin, but it did leave a lot of lasting good. That I will say, which is different than the way the United States occupies. When the UK was occupying, or when it was ruling, it was leaving its institutions. It was building its institutions and leaving it there. And people were actually living in the countries. They were moving and living and building in those countries. The US just kind of plops its military there, and that's it. And then when it leaves, there's nothing left. There's no real influence left. And that's real quick. That's my take on it with Cyprus.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Another good movie, Alexander Gallipoli with Mel Gibson.
Oh yeah, absolutely, very good movie. Yeah.
I recommend that movie. Very good movie. Yeah. Let's see, who do we have here? So here, are you ready? I'm gonna throw you into the stream.
How are you?
How are you doing, Zahir?
I'm not too bad. It's actually morning over here in Toronto, Canada. If I am British right now, I would be offended when Joe Biden telling Britain to get back into the EU. I mean, this is people voted to get out of EU, and he's gonna tell them to get back into it. I mean, I would be offended if I'm British, and it just shows how the way that now the Britain is having problems with EU. It just shows how toxic EU really is. And first, I want to talk about this, and then there are other two things. What do you guys think about that?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, many people are extremely offended about what the British have been, about what the US has been saying. The extent of British anger has been made very clear by Boris Johnson's statements over the last 2 days. Now, he's been very careful not to criticize the Americans, because there is an understanding in Britain that you don't criticize the Americans. The last prime minister who did that to any extent was Margaret Thatcher, who did from time to time criticize the Americans, but that secretly, inwardly, the British are furious. They're very, very angry with the EU, and they're very, very angry with the way in which the Americans and the Biden administration are behaving. They are indeed extremely offended. They're getting a sense that other countries, the United States and the Europeans, are ganging up against them, and that doesn't put them in a good frame of mind at all.
So now, you see, now Britain knows what Ukraine was feeling in 2014 when your US and the EU ganging up on Ukraine in 2014. Now Britain is feeling the same pain.
Yeah, I know, but unfortunately, you're not going to find many people in Britain who are prepared to accept that comparison. I say that, though I think they should, but you're absolutely right to make that comparison. But very, very few people in Britain are aware of it or would make it. But EU tactics in the run-up to the crisis in Ukraine, which ended up, let's never forget, in a war, are exactly the same as US tactics towards Britain. And of course, if they do end in a conflict in Northern Ireland, which heaven forbid, by the way, but if they do, well, it will be for the same reasons, because of the way in which the EU inserts itself into these conflicts and acts in a way that, whether by design or by accident, ends up massively exacerbating them. And more people in Britain are going to believe that it was done by design.
You've been to Northern Ireland. How is that place, Northern Ireland?
It's an absolutely beautiful place. It's one of the most beautiful parts of the United Kingdom. And by the way, Ireland and the Irish Republic, it's beautiful. The people are extremely friendly. It's in some ways reminded me a little in the sense of courtesy, the good manners that people have, of the Britain of my childhood. We've moved away a little from that in Britain. You know, the British were always famous for their good manners. That survives in Ireland to an extraordinary degree. It's got enormous culture. It's a vibrant place. It should be able to do extremely well. Once it sorts itself out, I'm confident that it will. But I came to the conclusion whilst I was there that it would happen eventually. It would be sorted out by Northern Ireland joining the Irish Republic. I got the overwhelming sense that that was the trajectory, and that if left alone, that was where it would end up. And I think if you try and accelerate that process, you will create many problems. If you don't and you leave it alone, then, as I said, the people there will find their solutions, and they will find them peacefully, and it will be a happy and prosperous place, but it will be part of Ireland. That's what I believe.
Are EU and US are trying to do the same thing to Britain, what they did to Ukraine in 2014? Looks like it.
Well, I don't know what their intentions are, but that, it seems to me, is the effect. And I mean, I really can very well believe it. So.
Oh, and the second thing I want to talk about, the German election, the Green Party. I don't want to see them anywhere near the office, because the leader of the Green Party recently went to the Ukraine, the eastern border point. I mean, what the hell was she thinking? She's in no position of going there. Like, who is she to do that?
Right, I don't think it was actually her. I think it was somebody else within the Green Party, but one of the other leading members of the Green Party. But you're fundamentally absolutely right. The Greens have been taken over by a very, very powerful neocon wing. They are Germany's fervid Euro-Atlanticist party. They believe in European integration. They believe in all the usual things that you expect from people who believe in all of those things. They want it's not just a single currency, a single financial system, a single system of law, all of those sort of things, gingered up with some ecological policies. Well, actually, more than gingered up, some of them very fervid ecological policies, and they also want, an implacable confrontation with Russia, a very close alliance with the United States, hostility to China, and all the rest. And many Germans don't like that at all.
I don't
and
understand.
That is why they're losing ground. That's why the Greens
the
are
Green
losing
Party,
ground.
the Green Party, do they even know the history of what happened in the Second World War and before?
Well, all I will say is this. I'm not a
Confronting
student.
Russia.
I'm not a student of green politics. I don't know how this came about. But of course, the Greens, when they were created in the late 70s and early 80s, were a completely different party in those days. At that time, they were a strongly anti-war party. They wanted better relations with Russia. They were, in fact, in those days, an anti-interventionist, anti-war, strongly ecological party. How they have morphed, at least at the level of their leadership, into the diametric opposite, I'm not really sure. But that's a subject of study which some people should want to carry out. But the effect is that though they increase their support considerably in Germany over many years, I think that is gradually melting away.
Okay. And third and fourth thing. Third thing I want to talk about is this Nord Stream 2. What's the update on that? I heard Putin says that it's kind of finished, or what's that?
Done deal.
It's a done deal. It's almost done. It's not absolutely completely finished, but it will be completed by sometime in August. So we're talking about weeks away, and then the gas will start to flow, and it will be done before the September, the German elections. The Germans are united, essentially, apart from the Greens, in wanting it done. The German business community wants it done. The Russians are committed to completing it, and it will be done. And the US can't really stop it. So it's almost a done thing now.
And last thing, I want to talk about this 2019, this North Macedonia. How did this name change? I don't understand. What happened from Macedonia to North Macedonia? How did that happen? Can you guys explain? Because I couldn't understand.
Well, the basic story again is to try to get Macedonia into the EU and into NATO,
so why change
and
the name?
into the Euro-Atlantic structures, in order to persuade enough people in Macedonia to go along with that, because they were far from sure that that's where they wanted to go. But that, of course, in turn meant putting enormous pressure on Greece. So we had all of this. The name of the country now, as I understand it, is North Macedonia, which many Macedonians find insulting and many Greeks find alarming. But it again was done through outside interference in order to achieve a Atlanticist objective, which is to counter Russian influence in the Balkans. That is something that is so overriding that everything else, all other considerations, the feelings of local people, the interests of the local countries, have to be sacrificed in order to keep the Russians out of the Balkans, even though, in fact, if you are in the Balkans, you know that they're not actually even there.
Well, even though Serbia, even though they should know that Serbia is a very strong ally of Russia, but this massive name change, I don't understand that. And plus, Tsipras did a lot of damage to Russia-Greek relations.
Oh, absolutely. He did enormous damage to Russian-Greek relations. He took a friendly relationship and he destroyed it. He turned it upside down. I wouldn't agree with you, by the way, about Serbia. I don't think Serbia is an ally of Russia. I think they are on very, very friendly terms. But I think the Serbian government has been trying at the moment to pursue a balancing act, keeping on good relations with the EU, which it has an aspiration eventually to join, whilst at the same time preserving a friendly relationship with Russia, which is what most Serb people want. So I would hesitate to say that Serbia is actually a Russian ally. I think that's putting it too strongly. It's friendly towards Russia, and Russians are very friendly towards Serbia. But allies, I don't think so.
Okay. Anyways, that's all I want to talk about, and uh, let's hope what's good will come out with Biden-Putin meeting, because I have no expectation. Believe me.
No, nor does anybody, nor do the Russians. As I said, the Russians have already been saying that, as far as they're concerned, they should expect no one should expect breakthroughs. Clearly, the
Because
wrong way to be.
I heard that Biden says he will say that they will relieve sanctions, come join us against China. Is that something going on, or what?
Well, what happened was this: there was an article in Washington Examiner, which is one of these there's lots of magazines in Washington that do political news. I mean, there's lots of them, and this is quite a well-connected one. And they spoke to White House officials, including Jake Sullivan, who is Biden's national security advisor, and they were told by these White House officials that the Russians would be warned that if they continued their misbehavior, there would be consequences, which essentially means more sanctions. And at the same time, they were also told that if they broke with China, they would be offered help. They would be offered financial help through the infrastructure fund, which of course the Russians will see as a bribe. So just as the US is offending Britain over Northern Ireland, the US is going to offend Russia with this mixture of threats and bribes, which is what apparently they're intending to come to the summit with. The Americans are coming to the summit with. So not a wise thing. I mean, bullying and bribing is not diplomacy. It's not how proper diplomacy is conducted.
And here in Canada, right, there's like calls from Chrystia Freeland to kick Russia out of Swift payment or Swift banking.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Russia is like ready, like saying, you know what, they can kick us out anytime.
Oh, absolutely. They've been preparing for this ever since 2014. They have all their systems in place to be ready for that. I think the only thing that they haven't yet worked out fully is their digital currency, which is coming next year, which would enable them to transfer funds without going through the Western banking system at all, and which would mean that they wouldn't have to use SWIFT anyway. But it's always important to remember that SWIFT is a messaging system. No money actually passes through SWIFT. All that passes are messages. And you could always set up a messaging system quite quickly. So this thing has been overplayed. Politicians don't understand how these things work. And they don't understand that around a third of SWIFT transactions have to pass through Russia anyway, because it is central to the communication systems that make up SWIFT. So it would actually be a big blow to SWIFT if Russia were disconnected from it. Again, I suspect Chrystia Freeland doesn't understand these things, because people like that never do understand these things, and then understand that there are all kinds of problems with what they're proposing. But the Russians are quite convinced. You look at follow their statements. They are absolutely sure that their disconnection from SWIFT is now only a matter of time.
Alrighty. Anyways, have a good one, guys. I thought I wanted to talk about it.
Too. You
Thank
too.
you, Zahir. Take care.
Thank you, Zahir.
Yeah.
All right. Who do we have? Let's bring in Simon. Simon, you're up next. And then we have Mac and King of Clowns. Simon, you're up. Simon, you there? Simon, are you with us? Well, we can barely hear you.
Barely hear
Yes,
you.
now we can. Now we can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're all good. Can you hear us?
I can't hear you guys.
Oh.
Can you hear us, Simon? Hello, Simon.
Simon?
Hello, Simon. All right. Simon, I'll get another call and we'll talk in the chat, see if we can get you hooked up. Can you hear us now? Okay, Simon, I'll move you here. And we'll bring in Mac. And I'll talk with Simon on the private chat.
Yeah.
Mac, are you with us?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Mac. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Good morning for me. Good afternoon for you, probably.
Yes. How are you?
I've been following you for more than a year, guys. I watch you every day. So I'm calling you from a country that probably is not under your radar, but yesterday you kind of mentioned the areas in South America. I'm calling from Peru.
Mhm.
Yesterday you mentioned the election, the situation in Colombia. So I'm calling for you guys to help us make sense of what's going on. And maybe this is a case study for what might happen in the region. So we had elections last Sunday.
Yeah. Very
Okay,
tight
and-
elections, I understand. Mr. Senor Castillo, I think, has become president, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, on the paper so far,
So far, yeah.
apparently he has won. So, but it's a strange situation because Castillo has had to enter into a coalition with a left party that identifies itself as Marxist, Maoist, and with the other left-leaning party, which is more like the woke party, the party that defends abortion and identity politics in a way, but which also criticizes the system in a way. And now the other candidate, as you may know, the Fujimori, who identifies as a right party, they defend the system, the neoliberal system. She has connections, strong connections with the business community, especially the oligarchy. And apparently she has some, there are accusations of connection with drug dealing lords. So it's very strange why these two candidates who actually independently have no more than 15% of support. Castillo, in the first round, obtained 13% of support, and Fujimori 10%. So why these two candidates are facing each other in the ballotage is something that I don't understand. But so Castillo seems to be, if he is really declared the president, he is not. He is a person who, as you denominate it, it would be the left, but the nationalist left. He's actually conservative. He's not pro-abortion. He is not pro-identity politics that much. He just wants to fight the oligarchies. But he had to enter into this coalition with the Marxist Maoists and the identity politics woke left. But Fujimori, on the other hand, she calls herself the right, but she defends the neoliberal system. She's a pro-system candidate. So what is going to happen? This probably what I'm mentioning, what I'm telling you guys is you may want to touch on this later, probably not now. I'm not. Maybe you're not prepared, but analyzing what's going on in Colombia and in Chile. And remember, Peru is between Colombia and Chile. With Colombia to the north and Chile to the south. What is going to happen with this? Oh, the only thing that Castillo has is he's talking about the change of constitution. The same thing that has happened in Chile, and probably the same thing that will happen in Colombia, some kind of change of constitution. So we are wondering who is more dangerous. If Castillo may have good intentions, he may be from the nationalist left, but he's weak in comparison to the Maoist and Marxist and to the identity politics woke left. Would he be pressured to take a pro-globalist agenda? Would it be better that Fujimori remains? Gets the election, defending the system, the neoliberal system again. She has the support of the military, which is pro-system also, the military. It's a tough situation, so I just wanted you guys to help us make sense of this. Thank you very much.
Mac, you can help us too, because of course I was reading about the Peruvian elections, which sound extremely interesting. And I noticed again something, by the way, that I noticed with the elections in Colombia, which is that the British media have been extremely pro-Castillo in the last couple of weeks. And I ask myself, why? What are the reasons for this? Why this interest in Castillo and why this support for him? And I don't really know. And again, I noticed also the very points that you made, that he started with a very low base of support, as did Fujimori. And how did these two people rise up? And he doesn't seem like he's in a very solid or strong position in Peru at the moment. And I noticed what you just said now, that he's not even yet fully confirmed that he has won. I think there are still challenges coming. So, I'm not quite sure what is going on. I think there's an awful lot of disaffection with the experience of the pandemic in places like Peru, but that can't be the whole story. And I understand that Peru, like every other country in South America, has its own structural and internal problems. But it doesn't seem as if what's happening is providing a clear way forward. On the contrary, and this is what I worry about. And of course, you're from Peru. You know what I mean. Peru has had a difficult history, and this seems to promise more instability, or at least at a political level. Now, I can't go deeper than this, because at this moment in time, there is so much about Peru that I don't know. I mean, it's something that I would have to look at much more deeply. But the first thing I would say is there's clearly a trend now. We see elections in Colombia. We see elections in Peru. We see elections in Chile. We saw much more decisive elections in Bolivia with a much stronger outcome. Something is going on in this part of the world. Ecuador, interestingly, went the other way. But all of these Andean countries seem to be shifting gradually towards the left. But it looks like it's an incoherent left. I should say, we didn't have elections in Colombia. We've got protests in Colombia. But we're seeing all of these things happening in the Andean region. And they all seem to be following a particular trend and a particular direction. And undoubtedly, they do reflect structural issues within the societies, these societies in this part of Latin America. But they don't seem to be cohering in any very clear way at the moment. So I just wonder how this is going to go. And Mac, you asked for our analysis and our discussion about this. We would love to have people from this part of the world contacting us, discussing this with us, explaining to us what is going on. Because, of course, Latin America is this neglected continent, which is now going to become increasingly important. And it's going to become, in a way that I suspect it hasn't been before, a place of enormous geopolitical interest. So the more you can tell us, the more we would love to know. But at the moment, a trend to the left, certainly, a very unstable coalition in Peru emerging on the left also, perhaps instability there, and I'm not sure very clear programs, if I have to be straightforward about it. I mean, when you talk about woke ideologies, I mean, is that something which, to be straightforward about this, many people in Peru would identify with? I would have thought not, from what I know about that kind of country.
It would be 50-50 because there are many traditionalist people. I mean, it's a traditional Catholic country.
Absolutely.
And so that's the reason. That's one of the reasons that the left-leaning parties that are more like identity politics, they didn't succeed that much because of that reason. That people are traditional here, or traditionalist. With this, I'm going to leave you. But the thing is that I'm kind of fearing for what I know of what has been going on in the world. It seems like if Castillo is certified as the president with this unstable coalition, I'm fearing, I fear that it could happen what happened in Egypt, that because the military is backing the other candidate, the military is pro-system, pro-neoliberal system. And if Castillo is pressured by the other left-leaning parties in the coalition to be more radical or strict, it's going to create a situation because the society is very polarized, very, very polarized, 50-50 or 51-49. It's very, very polarized. So if Castillo tries to be strict and get away from the system, there might be a coup. I'm fearing that matching the style of what happened in Egypt. I'm fearing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I hope you're wrong, but I'm afraid you may very well be right. I'm not going to pretend that I know enough to be able to say one way or the other whether that's so. But it doesn't look very stable to me, not at all. And it looks very polarized. And of course, the other thing that if what I'm reading about the situation in Peru is right, it's also becoming very much divided on regional lines and perhaps even to some extent on, ethnic lines. But that's at least how it's been spun in the media in Europe. But of course, one's got to be very careful assuming what the media says. I hope there isn't a coup, but I can't pretend I'd be entirely surprised if there was.
Yes, me too. You're right. There is a lot of ethnic talk. The ethnic component is also being played. But anyway, thank you guys
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank you,
Matt. Comments.
Thank you.
I'm gonna keep following you every day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. All right. Great call. Let's bring in Simon again. Simon, I'm going to throw you into the live stream.
Hi, can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Apologies about that. I don't know. I think it was the internet gremlins before.
No worries.
I've actually been talking to Alex in the chat. I didn't know if the audience was aware that Christopher Singer, who was the journalist that broke the story that Bill Clinton met with I believe it was the Attorney General during email scandals. Yes, he died in mysterious circumstances this weekend. And apparently,
can I just say, I'll just say this: NBC News did their interview with Putin at the Kremlin. Alexander, Simon, to everyone that's listening, and the journalist. I'm sure you guys have seen this. And the journalist reads the list, Alexander, of all the names of the people that supposedly Putin had killed. Right, the usual name: Nemtsov and who else? Magnitsky. You know the name of 5 people, right? And the journalist reads this off to Putin and. He says, this is your list of people that you've killed. I'm paraphrasing. He says, these people have all died and, you ordered their assassination. Of course, Putin was laughing at it. And he's just like, give me a break. Here we go. These 5 people again. Right. And what was the guy in London? Oh, God. I forgot the name.
The one who was killed with polonium.
Polonium, yeah.
Litvinenko, yeah.
Litvinenko, and anyway. Yeah. And Putin called it indigestion, he said. Verbal indigestion. and that was NBC. A day later, this guy Christopher Sign mysteriously dies. And I mean, it's just no one ever questions Hillary Clinton or the Clinton family about all of these mysterious deaths. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about it. No one ever questions her.
But Alex, would you doubt that an organization as efficient as the FSB probably does have some evidence that would stand up in court, and they probably only need a friendly channel to release that to that could be extremely embarrassing for not just Hillary, but given Biden's behavior. I know he's been talking very tough about China, but he's actually lifted the sanctions on one particular Chinese company that's heavily involved in their military development program, specifically to do with their hypersonic missiles. So I think we should all take whatever President Biden says with a mountain of salt in terms of what his intentions actually are and what he's actually going to do.
God knows what Hunter was up to in Ukraine. God knows what the Russians have.
Anyway. It's
I
just
better stop talking.
You can imagine the meeting, the meeting between Putin and Biden, and Putin's just going to be sitting there and thinking, okay, well, I've got the pictures of your son doing X, Y, and Z. I've got the bank account, the transfers. I mean, the U.S. Senate and Congress has the cash transfers. It's very hard to lecture someone when you're a crook. It's a very difficult exercise, so it should be quite entertaining. I actually think we may see a first. I think we may actually see Putin break down in laughter and literally be crying from laughter at Biden's pomposity. So that's what I'm hoping for to come from the meeting, because I think that's probably the best that can happen.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. You might get your wish, Simon. You might very well get your wish.
Well, it's interesting. Even journalists in CNN are struggling not to laugh at Biden, and I've even seen Kamala Harris is starting to get lectured by CNN now because of her non-answers about not going to the border. When super woke CNN is laughing at you, you have a serious problem if you're a woke progressive. I think there's quite. I thought I'd make a list of the things that I'd like to cover. I don't want to take lots of time, but I mentioned in the live chat about Tim Pool not being able to get a mortgage for a residential property in your earlier program on Friday. But there's also other interesting things going on in the US banking system where they're actually refusing to take deposits, and this is basically because of the new banking regulations that come under Basel III. Because a bank has to treat a deposit as a liability, and they've got so much money sitting in their bank accounts at the moment that no one's spending, that this is causing real disruptions within the US banking system. And I think this is only going to get worse. And I think the other thing that really shocked me is on the live stream on Friday when I just asked if people, were they experiencing inflation in their countries. I don't know. You probably didn't have an opportunity to see it, but the actual live stream itself exploded in terms of comments from people. So I was wondering if the Duran could have a little side project, because you have such wide geographical coverage, and this is, I think, deliberately not getting a lot of coverage in the UK media or any media that I see, where you could actually, ask your viewers to start monitoring price rises in their area and compare them as to what the official government figures are, because so many official government figures don't include things like fuel prices or cost of living, so renting or your mortgage. So we could probably get a more accurate view of what's actually really going on than we get from the media. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think that would be a great thing for the Duran to do, like on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think it would be a great idea, actually. I think it would be a great idea.
Yeah, we could try to. I'm just trying to think of what form that would take.
But can I make a suggestion, like a poll? Pick some standard food products. And just say, are you noticing? Because the other thing you will see, and this goes back many years when I was working for a very weird organization, but also package sizing. What you will start to see is that package sizes start to shrink, because that's a way of keeping the price the same, but obviously providing you with less products. So I've already started to notice this happening in the UK, and I'm sure it will start happening elsewhere. So that's the other thing to be aware of. So, just a list of staples and things like, petrol, certain foods, and then just, a cost per litre or a cost per kilogram or something like that. because I think that would be a really interesting thing to see. Because you know, the CPI price inflator in the US is you know, the last figure announced was 5%. But if you look at I think it's shadowfax.org, which uses the 1980s CPI, it says it's 15, which is a huge difference. So I think that would be a good thing, and it, you know, sort of, if people just like email in their prices from different countries, I think that would be a really good way of identifying, you know, what's going on. The other big point I would make, and I think this is the biggest one, is the capture of the left by effectively corporations. And I think so much of what we're seeing, the focus on wokeness by corporations, but also corporations, you actually, when I used to be on Twitter, I could always get a good rise out of a progressive by saying, how does it feel to be on the same side as Goldman Sachs? And so many of the left seem to be unaware that what their actions are doing and what their activities are doing are actually helping the corporatists and the globalists, rather than the working class who they're meant to be supporting. So I don't know what your views are on that.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and there has been a takeover of the left by corporatists, and it is a most extraordinary thing. It's a huge subject, and one which one doesn't quite know where to begin with, because, of course, it is, in a way, the deconstruction of the left's practice.
Can I just stop you?
Yeah, go on.
I want to ask you a question, Alexander, because I think you'll be able to answer it better than anybody. Can't you make the argument that many of the things that the left stand for are globalist? And, you know, there you have that intersection. For example, you know, the climate change agenda is inherently a globalist agenda. UBI is something the globalists are after. I mean, each for their own different reasons. But is it in a natural progression that the left now, the things that they're wanting are very much the same things that the globalists want? Once again, they each have a different agenda at the end of the day, and the globalists and the left share many of the same. They share the same wish list, but the left may be unaware that the globalists, what they plan to do with the power that they get. But, you know, it's a natural progression.
I'm not sure that they do have a different agenda, actually. It seems to me that they have the identical agenda, because as far as I can see, the left in the West today is entirely globalist. Well, when I was talking about the left, I'm thinking more about the left, which I remember in the 100 years ago. But do remember that I'm of a certain age, and I remember, you know, that was the left I was brought up with. Now, how that changed so completely, I don't know, but it did. It changed sometime in the 80s, 90s. It completely changed itself. But having been brought up with that left, I find the current left utterly bewildering, if I have to be straightforward about it. I mean, it is a globalist. What it is, in effect, is the left wing of the globalist movement. But I mean, maybe it's not even the left wing. It is, if you like, the globalist movement. The only opposition to them, it seems to me, doesn't really come from. I'm not even sure that these words have any meaning anymore, because I said it's become such a different left from the left I was brought up with, that it has some kind of, it takes bits and things that the old left used to use, and it uses some of its slogans, and it packages it into something so completely different that, as I said, I don't understand it very well. But go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, if I'd have said to you 20 years ago, Alexander, that virtually every single leftist movement in the West will be funded by a multi-billion billion-dollar hedge fund manager, who is also a former collaborator with the Nazi occupation of Hungary, and that they will basically be at his beck and call. you would have probably suggested that I go and seek mental health support.
Absolutely, entirely. But I mean, in a way, I mean, I understand I mean, what I'm talking about is in a way history. I mean, if you're talking about the left today, I mean, the left today is entirely globalist. It is entirely focused on identity issues. It is entirely part of this package of ideas that we're talking about. And I mean, I don't see that it has a different agenda. I see that it has exactly the same agenda. It's a very strange agenda, one that I find extremely disturbing. But if you like, that is the enemy now.
But I think that's the battlefield on which we should fight.
Well, absolutely.
It's like the mayor of one of the mayoral candidates who's supported by Ocasio-Cortez just received a $500,000 donation from Soros's Open Society Foundation. Yeah. Well, you're a mayor. You have high city taxes on the wealthy. And you're accepting a donation from someone who I think he didn't pay any income tax for 3 years in the last 5. How can you justify accepting any money from him at all? Shouldn't you say thank you very much, but I prefer if you paid that in tax rather than as a political donation to me?
Well, absolutely.
I mean,
that is the position which, as I said, I once remember, 30, 40 years ago, left-wing parties accepted. Once upon a time, it would have been inconceivable that they would have involved themselves with someone like Soros. But you're quite right, and she is the standard bearer of the left today.
Either you love your country or you're a globalist. Yeah. That's the way I see it. It's being very simplistic, but that's the way it's moving. But I think the whole left-right thing is fading away. Either you're forced sovereignty, your country's sovereignty. Yeah, it's gone. Your country's tradition. It's languages, it's culture, or you're just tear it all down. I want to tear it all down.
And you can have arguments within that system about, how to organize economies and all kinds of things of that kind, and economic policies that you can follow. But that line of division has gone. What you now have is something entirely different, which is that, you homogenize and globalize everything, but internally everybody has to follow that particular course that is decided for by a group of oligarchical people who have their own agenda, which we've been talking about so much in these programs.
But isn't this one of the major failures of our political system as a whole? Because there are, I mean, I'm slightly to the right of Attila the Hun. But there are things that even someone who holds my views, I don't believe companies should have monopolies. No. I don't believe that companies should be allowed to do massive share buybacks. No. IBM's bought back over $165 billion of its shares.
Yeah.
If I was a shareholder, I'd be going to the CEO. So you literally you're not paying me my extra dividends. And all you're doing is you're not benefiting me by your actions. You're just benefiting yourself because you're paid based on the earnings per share. And the fewer shares there are in the market, the more money you make. I suggest you start looking for another job. But there's plenty of things for the left to attack. The traditional left could have attacked, but there is no interest in that at the moment at all.
None at all. But I mean, but Simon, can I just also say, I mean, what you're also articulating was a right-wing position. Right-wing people, to my knowledge, tended to be opposed to monopolies. So that was, if you go back to, Adam Smith and all that sort of doctrine of thinking, it was always very much against concentration of power in a very unbalanced way, because it was seen as interrupting the operations of the market and business and preventing businesses developing and that sort of thing. You're quite right that the left should be challenging those things, but so should the right. It's a question not of just right and left anymore. If you like, it's more democracy against oligopoly, if you like. I mean, we're in a completely different political world today, where I think people who belong to the old left and people who belong to the right have more in common with each other, if I can say, on many things than the conflict that we look at the moment.
Well, I think that's true, and I think that's a really good description, and I think that's the clash that's going on in the GOP in the States, where you're seeing like a rump that's still like very much a corporatist view, like we're the Republican Party, therefore we have to automatically be pro-business, and because of Trump and the MAGA movement, that's been rejected. I mean, I really think. I do think I always remember when Thatcher was in power, and Thatcher made many mistakes. She didn't realize the importance of industrial power to the national security of a nation. But she changed the game, and I really think that that's what Trump has done. And even he's changed it within the GOP, and I think the GOP, whoever runs in 2024. Will either be Trump or will have to have his blessing. But I do think the days of the corporatists in the GOP are numbered. And then I do think that my real profound fear is that the circumstances will be so bad in November 2022 that the Democrats will have done so much damage and behaved so badly that they won't risk having a fair election. And I don't know if you saw it, but apparently there was a tweet from a state senator in Arizona threatening the Attorney General of the United States with prosecution if the DOJ in any way interferes with the Arizona audit. But I think we are coming up to a crisis point. In 3 or 4 years, things are either going to be an awful lot better, and we will be over this, or it's going to be an awful lot worse.
I completely agree with you. I agree with every single point you've made. By the way, if we go back to this original point about the corporates taking over the left, you could equally well argue if you're talking about parties, and because you talked about supporting business. I mean, much of what calls itself business today isn't business. I mean, big tech companies, do they really operate any longer in businesses in the way that they understood that word? You could just as well argue that big corporations have been taken over by the left. Well, what calls itself the left? Because they become, in effect, machines for propagating its ideas, or what they call its ideas. It's a very strange symbiosis of things, which really needs an awful lot more unpacking than we can do on a program like this. But can I just say, on your point that things could get an awful lot worse than they are, and that could drive some people to even more extreme actions, you are absolutely right. And already, in fact, we are seeing the first signs of this. And it's something to be seriously concerned about. And well, there's a storm coming. That's my own personal view. I don't think things are going to get better. Certainly not in any short term. Later, further up the way, no doubt they will. But in the immediate term, I think things are going to get a lot worse.
It is. I think I agree with you. I think that's right, and I think it's the ultimate perfect storm. It's societies. If you have a bad harvest, but you can bring in food from somewhere else, a civilization can survive. If you fight a war, but your food supplies are secure, the society continue to function. But I think we're looking at a real test of the system that our betters, or people who think they're our betters, is going through and is failing miserably, and that 2022 is going to be a crisis year, because it's not just the US election, it's the French presidential election, and they can't produce another Macron.
No,
they can't pull that stunt.
No.
So I think they are going to try and God knows what steps they will take. But I think if you press people too hard, you will be very, very surprised at how they will react and how violent that reaction will be.
Yes.
And I really don't think that the people that I've met in our elite are the singly most unimpressive people you could ever meet. I remember arguing with a member of the cabinet office about something, and I had to say he was probably one of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life. He literally couldn't understand things. So that doesn't fill me with confidence. But
no,
I'll just say one last thing. The US fleet is getting smaller. The Americans are just going to, they have these vessels called lateral control ships, which were sort of like frigate-like class ships. And because of the fact that they've failed in operational service, they have 35 operational at the moment, and they're actually going to retire 15. So the US Navy is getting even smaller as the Chinese Navy is getting bigger. But I'll leave it there. I always come on here and enjoy it so much, but it's always so depressing. hopefully we'll get some good news at some point.
Oh, we will eventually, but I mean, we will get through all of this. But no, I have to say, Simon, can I just say this? I always enjoy your comments. They're always thoughtful and they're always interesting, and I enjoy discussing with you.
Well, I enjoy it. I enjoy, and I always enjoy all your videos as well, keeping us so informed. I mentioned to Alex in the chat that GB News had been launched in the UK.
Right, I've heard about this.
Yeah, but I have to say, I mean, I watched a few episodes of Spectator TV on YouTube, and was very, very disappointed.
Yeah.
I still think that I think you need people outside the bubble who are clear thinkers, who have experience of the world, and that defines both of you gentlemen. So thank you very much for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you,
Simon. Take care. All right, let's bring in, who's up next here? King of Clowns. King of Clowns, you're coming into the stream. Are you with us, King of Clowns? Hey, how are you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hey, my name's John. I'm from Australia.
Hey, John.
If it's all right, I'll just ask my question and then hop off and listen to your response.
Yeah, no worries.
I was just curious as to what, I guess, what power or influence does the Holy See have in 2021? And second to that, can you foresee a time, perhaps sooner than later, that they would cease to recognise Taiwan and instead begin to recognise the PRC? Or do you think that would be highly unlikely?
Who am you referring to? The Holy See changing its recognition?
Yeah, they currly recognise Taiwan, but not the PRC.
I wasn't aware of that, but it doesn't surprise me. There's all kinds of reasons. Now, I am going to say straightforwardly, I think the Holy See, the Church, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, I think that if you go back in time to the world which I remember, the world of the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was a major political force. It was one of the dominant cultural, ideological forming things in the world. I think its power is hugely diminished, and its diplomatic reach has hugely diminished. And I think that with the current Pope Francis, I think that's accelerated, actually, despite all the attempts to do otherwise. So I don't think it has a huge amount of influence, and what influence it has is dwindling fast. But in terms of China, I think it's entirely possible that they may come to some kind of rapprochement with China. The big issue with China is that China does not permit the Catholic Church to operate on Chinese territory. It's the church in China, which is connected historically to the Catholic Church, was made during the Maoist era to break with the Vatican and operate on an independent basis. The Vatican wants to regain some kind of control over that church. The Chinese government absolutely opposes that. And that's probably why relations between the Vatican and the Chinese government have never been fully restored. Now, I would not be surprised, given the trajectory of travel, if one day the Vatican decides that from their point of view, they might as well agree to establish diplomatic relations with Beijing and forget about the church in China, because that does seem to me to be partly what the current Vatican is all about. Just to say, my father once told me that during the war, there was a kind of joke that used to circulate in Europe, which is that there were three powers in Europe. This is, of course, during the Second World War, that they were the Communist Party, the Prussian General Staff, and the Vatican. Those are the three great powers in Europe. Well, no one would say that about any of those three today. So the Vatican is still there, but it is a very diminished force.
Interesting. All right, great. Thank you very much for that question, John. Let's bring in military of 21st century is up.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi,
how
hello.
are you?
Hello.
Good. How are you guys?
Doing good. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, good. I'm good. Thank you. So Mr. Alexander and Mr. Christopher. So I'm currently living in China right now, and so I just got a few questions for you. So I've always been very respectful for your videos, and I think they are the good news, the true news. One of the few true news channel remains on the YouTube platform, I think. Yeah. So I'll just ask you a few questions, and let's start with the first easy one. Okay. So the first one is, do you think the Chinese people are brainwashed? Let me repeat again. So do you think the Chinese people are brainwashed? So I think this is a common stereotype in the Western countries, but do you think that is real?
Absolutely not. I think this is a complete misconception. I think this is entirely wrong. I've been to China. I was very, very impressed by what I saw in China. As I said, there were aspects of Chinese society which I would not want to see in my own country, but I was very impressed by it. I got the strong impression that Chinese people are very proud of what their country has achieved, and they are fully aware of the world and what is going on around it. And I think that I think any idea that the Chinese people are brainwashed is completely absurd and completely wrong. And I don't think that it has any connection to reality in China. I think what people in the West do not understand is the actual very great pride the Chinese people feel in their country at this particular time. I saw that in China. I saw the reasons for it, and I understand it. And that is a force in the world today. And everybody around the world needs to take that into account.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you know, you're a very knowledgeable person, and you know a lot about China. So let's move to the next topic. So do you think that the PRC, the mainland China, will attack Taiwan or not? So if they will, so when will that be? So please give us.
Right. Well. As I understand it, the Chinese government has made its position on this absolutely clear, which is that they reserve the right to attack Taiwan. To act against Taiwan if they believe that Taiwan is trying to assert its independence, to break away from China. China considers Taiwan to be a Chinese province, got historical basis for making that claim. But if they feel that Taiwan is breaking away, if they feel that the prospect of reunification is impossible, then they are prepared one day to take action, military action, to bring Taiwan back into union with China. They've made that very, very clear. They've also said that that's not their intention at the moment, and that they're not giving themselves any timetable in which that is to happen. But they reserve the right to do it. And they've also said that this is for them, for the Chinese government, an absolutely essential issue. And if it does happen, it's so important to China that they will be prepared, if the United States interferes, to fight the United States. And in that case, the United States would have a fight on its hands, and China has the political will to engage in that fight. And they question whether the United States does. And by the way, I think the latter is a valid calculation.
All right. So yeah, that's a very precise and just personally, I think that's a very precise and accurate comment about the China's stand on Taiwan. But just I just have one question left about the. Sorry, give me 1 second. I just almost forgot it. So yeah. So that's it. I think so. I really enjoy the channel, and I want to buy some clothes from the Duran shop. But I think there can be some improvements. Just this is just my personal opinion. I'll just make it quick. Okay. So I love the T-shirts, but I think the flags on the T-shirts are a little bit too small. So people may not notice them. So maybe perhaps this can be improved in the future, and I'm glad if I can see them in the future, and I will be sure I will buy them. Yeah.
Yes, actually, actually I've got in the comments about the flags on the shirts and the hats, and we are going to be making them bigger. So we have gotten that comment from others as well. So I will be working on that.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just
Great. Take care. Take care. Thank you for the call.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Great call. Great call there. Where are we? Peter. Yes, Peter. I'm going to bring you into the stream.
Okay.
Peter.
Hi, guys.
Yes. Yes. How are you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Thanks.
Loud and clear.
Thanks for all your hard work recently. It's really extremely useful to actually have these intelligent, independent voices actually challenging narratives and actually showing another side on the internet. So showing the other side in respect to a Russian point of view or a Chinese or whatever, and also showing what I would say was a conservative point of view on things, which are both things that people need to actually understand, that there are sort of, especially liberals need to understand that there are other positions. So other countries have their own valid views, and also that there are sort of other maybe ideologies that also have legitimacy as well. So it's extremely useful having you as a voice on the internet, I think. In terms of question, I wondered if you had any thoughts on the Greek labour reforms and all the stuff regarding austerity and such like. So in essence, there are sort of reforms in France and also Greece in respect to labour law reform. Do you think, in terms of Greece, do you think it could possibly improve things, or do you think it's just more asset stripping, really, of the Greek people? I'm actually based in Athens, by the way.
Yes. Alexander, you want to comment, or you want me to comment on?
Well, yeah, I think you should comment.
I don't think it's going to make any difference. They've been doing this for the past 20 years. Greece is 350 billion in debt, and they've been 350 billion in debt now for 15 years. It's not changing. It's going up, actually. And Tsipras signed away the country. Papandreou signed the debt to the people. He moved it from the banks to the people. Tsipras signed the debt for the next till 2118, I think is the precise date. These labor laws don't make a difference. Greece has got very deep, serious structural and societal problems that they're not going to be able to fix inside the euro currency. I don't want to say EU, inside the euro currency. They won't be able to fix this. They could do any labor laws they want. It's not going to fix anything.
And that's where sort of G7 really becomes important, because it's a neoliberal project to actually asset strip and do everything else like that. In terms of Greece, say, I mean, it obviously has a very educated population, it has lots of resources, it has all sorts of things, and it's extremely hardworking. And it really should be a country where the people don't have to leave the country to actually make a living. So it really shows quite how bad this project of the last 30 years or so has been. Although Greece has never been a rich country, but and it's always had an outward migration as well. But I think it really shows what the issue is. But is there any solution? I mean, would you want to leave a European Union as well as a euro? Would you want to? Do you think there should be a Balkan grouping or something?
Well, someone's honking their horn outside. Greece, you see, very loud. But look, when I first met Alexander, actually, I'll give you a story. When I first met Alexander, the first conversation that we had was related to Greece, and I'll answer the question. We had a way out. Germany gave us the way out. They really did. And Alexander, you can speak to this. Absolutely. They structured a way for us to stay in the European Union, but to phase out of the euro. And that would have helped Greece. Greece turned it down. And that was that. And I'm going to mute my mic because out in the street, it's just going crazy. Alexander.
No, absolutely. I mean, it came from the German finance minister, Mr. Schäuble. He offered Greece 50 billion euros to tide it over if it pulled out of the euro. He said that Greece should not continue to remain in the euro. He wanted a complete restructuring. And he said that this was the way forward, a long-term sustainable solution for the Greek economic crisis. Tsipras rejected it. He didn't want it. And in fact, he got his friends in Washington, Obama, to actually put pressure on the Germans to withdraw the offer, or rather to not withdraw the offer, to sort of row back on it. So that was was a way out. But to come back to your initial question, Greece, before it leaves the EU, maybe it should leave the EU, but it definitely needs to leave the euro. Alex is absolutely right. Unless and until Greece does that, unless and until it leaves the euro, it cannot make its economy competitive. And it has to engage in a proper restructuring. That's what should have happened way back in 2011. Rather than convert all that debt into public debt now owed to European institutions, there should have been a proper restructuring of the kind that many countries around the world, when they fall into debt crisis, run into. Instead, we've been trapped inside a currency system which makes our economy uncompetitive and which destroys the productive aspects of our economy. And at the same time, that economy is bled even further by the need to continue to pay off this debt, which, as Alex says, despite all the massaging that continues, either remains or grows. Neither way out. And it's a tunnel with no light at the end of it.
And we have no more assets, Alexander. How many more assets are we going to sell? We're selling ports, we're selling islands. We're going to sell the Acropolis soon, and I'm not exaggerating. How many more assets do we have to sell? We're being stripped, and there's nothing left.
And that's the whole problem of the G7 is that it's all Greece. The whole of the G7 is Greece under an American system which wants complete free trade and and open borders, and isn't really that bothered about the people who actually inhabit the places. And so we're all in Greece. We're all Greece now, I think. So that's the real issue. And exactly how to break out of it is
the Greek model is the Greek model is the model. And don't forget the Cyprus model too, Peter. Remember in Cyprus 2013, they went into the banks and they took the money. People always forget the Cyprus issue. They took people's money.
Absolutely.
It's okay to take Russian people's money because no one likes the Russian, or the Americans don't actually like the Russians. So you can just go and you can target Russian crooks, but not anyone else. So
well, they took Cypriots' money. I mean, I remember the day I woke up on that Saturday morning and I walked over to grab a coffee, and people had their bank accounts drained to zero.
Yeah.
Literally taken. Just you go to sleep on a Friday and you think you have X amount of euros in your bank account, and you wake up the next day and it is gone. And that's how quickly they did it. And no one saw it coming. It was very sneaky. It was a bank robbery, a sophisticated bank robbery carried out by the technocrat crooks in Brussels. And to this day, people in Cyprus are pro-EU. Go figure. Go figure.
The same in Greece as well. But the thing with the money system is huge, because it's a bit like with sanctions. The Americans and the West, to some degree, are all using their control over the financial system to control people effectively. So so they're sort of printing money, and then they're also sanctioning people they don't like. And there's the stuff about sort of blocking the SWIFT as well in Russia, and I assume also Iran and other places. So money is a weapon. So it's all been weaponized, which is what you.
And they can take it away from you. They can take it away from you literally within a second. And they've done it before, and they'll do it again, and they'll do it to other countries as well. Just like they did to Cyprus, they'll do it to other countries as well. If they're feeling squeezed, or if they need money, they will go into a bank and they'll just take it. And then they're sitting there and they're lecturing the world about how Bitcoin is this and crypto is that. Give me an effing break. Crypto is the only way we're going to free ourselves from these guys, and they know it.
Well, if it's the answer, I don't think it's the answer in itself. Last thing though, have you read C.J. Hopkins, the chap who writes
he writes quite amusingly, very well actually. He writes about many things. Yes, I do read him from time to time.
Yeah, but he's fascinating in the well. I think he sort of sums it up well. That in essence, the system, you call it Borg or whatever you want to, they had a war on terror, and they were spreading democracy in the Middle East. And his view is that that's actually transformed into a war on populism, where they're going to spread democracy at home. So you have all the same language about democracy and the evil bad guys. And sadly, the evil bad guys seem to be us these days, or sort of the sort of more conservative-minded sort of people. So that's his basic thesis. I'd really recommend reading him also on the virus as well. He's very interested in the virus and the various controls being implemented on that. But as it's seems to me to be a very a dangerous situation. And when I look at the G7, it doesn't fill me with hope, because I see there a sort of an American control system in place, or at least what they would want to be the core of this imperial project. So Canada and Europe, which obviously hasn't actually gone along all the time with America, but that's the core of the American countries. And the idea is that this is spreading globalism and globalization and democracy, etc. So it strikes me as being not a particularly pleasant situation. But anyway, I'll leave you with those thoughts anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for all the good work, okay?
Thank you. Take care. Okay, we'll do 2 more calls and then we'll get to super chats. We have Costa Constantine, I believe, is with us.
Yes. Hello.
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. I've been enjoying the show. Thank you for. And the colors were very great. I want to touch a little bit on the same topics. First, about inflation, there was a suggestion to make like a call-in show or to take from people inflation. There's actually some good websites. For example, I just Googled Numbeo cost of living comparison. You can actually go there and add your city information, and you can look what people from other cities say. So if you want to do like a program on inflation, you don't have to start from scratch. There's quite good examples of that already done. Just a suggestion. Next, about this what's it called? Build Back Better World initiative. I'm wondering how, like, when I have first heard about it, I was actually kind of like positive towards it because I think it's like, how should I say it? When there was talk about climate change, when there was the Paris Climate Accord, they talked a lot about how the rich countries are going to help the poor countries to move to deal with climate change, how they're going to invest. And well, last week there was elections in Finland, so I've been listening to what politics here are about, and they're all about political correctness and climate change. So when this thing came out, I thought like maybe my first reaction was like maybe this is a move in the correct direction, because if you want to deal with climate change, I really don't understand when people pour billions of dollars into Finland, which is already quite clean, to be honest, and any investment that is made here is very expensive. If you build anything here, it's really expensive. If you invest the same amount of money in Africa, in India, you're going to build 10 times more. And also I see climate change as an like economic poverty problem, because why people suffer from climate change? Because they don't have money to solve the problem of drought, the problem of weather, or some kind of catastrophe. If there was like infinite amount of money if everyone was as rich as US, I think people could just build some desalination plants or something and deal with any problem. Like people are growing some type of food on the International Space Station. Surely we can deal with, as long as economic growth is good enough, many of the problems that come from climate change can actually be solved here. But then, on the other hand, when you think about this, it's not like it's the first time the developed world is investing in developing countries. There's this whole World Bank programs, this IMF programs, and like you're gonna run in all the same problems that they had. I don't really understand why people think it's gonna be somehow very different this time, because developing countries are not very democratic. So that's a problem for Biden's narrative about authoritarian countries against democratic countries. How are they going to invest in countries which are not democratic when, and especially this idea that they're going to suggest anything to Russia on Putin-Biden summits. Like they already sanctioned everything that Russia might need. Then the second problem is if they're gonna go, well, they're gonna open up for private business so everyone can participate. Companies from Turkey, from China, from India can participate in this, in bidding for these infrastructure projects. And I don't really see how European countries can compete with Chinese infrastructure building, because like what is infrastructure? It's mostly steel, cement, with the really energy intensive, high cost, and the industries which have been dealing very badly in Europe. Even on the European market, many European companies cannot compete. If they're going to go in developing world, into Africa, into Latin America, and like make a good auction there, then probably it's going to be China and Russia and I don't know, India, Turkey that's going to take most of the that's going to win most of this money. Yeah, what do you think it's going to be any different? What's going to be the effect of this?
No, my own personal view is that first of all, I'm not sure how this infrastructure program, whatever it's called, is going to work. But I basically see it as an EU-style slush fund in which you set up money, you put up money to basically build infrastructure. Some of it goes to the contractors, some of it goes to local politicians. It's all going to be done by private businesses, so-called. And of course, it's going to foster corruption. I think that's exactly what it's going to do.
That's its purpose.
That is its purpose. That is why it's been set up in this way. It is just as the EU slush funds, structural funds and all the rest exist in order to consolidate support for the EU project, which is why it does get a lot of support from all sorts of people. So this fund is intended to do the same thing. It's intended to buy support from people around the world. It's not really intended as a proper infrastructure program at all. So at best, you'll get roads built which lead to nowhere, dams built where they're not needed, electricity stations in the wrong places, hospitals which perhaps have no doctors because the people who run the hospitals are pocketing the money from the people who are supposed to be working in the hospitals. It's going to be all that sort of thing, but it will have a political utility in that it will make politicians in some countries feel, and business leaders in some countries want to continue this cash moving because it wins them over. Having said that, the cost of this, I mean, talk about $40 trillion is so enormous that I wonder where even that can be found.
Actually, I think $40 trillion is not the sum they want to spend. At least what I read on the White House press release, they said this is meant to shorten the 40 trillion infrastructure gap or something, like narrow the gap.
You're right, but even then, it is again whatever. That's perhaps a point, because $40 trillion is a figure, but this comes with no real figure, no real plan behind it. It's not even clear where this money's coming on. Who's going to put it up? Will the United States put it up? Will the European Union put it up? Will private businesses put it up? I'm not quite sure at all how this is going to work. But it looks to me, as I said, much more like a kind of glorified European structural fund built up on a global basis than a real infrastructure program for the global south and for Africa. We've had those sort of things, by the way, proposed before. I can remember a summit meeting happening, I think it was in the 1990s, in Gleneagles in Scotland, presided over by Tony Blair, in which there was also going to be a great program to create infrastructure in Africa. So we've had that before. That didn't work then. I don't expect this is going to work now.
Yeah. So, but it's probably also seen like some kind of a stimulus program for countries' own companies, because I think US and Europe fully expect that these countries are gonna buy more from Europe from US. But I really don't see how that can really happen unless they make some kind of a point in there that you have to buy only from us, which is really not free market and not what they say they're going to do.
Well, absolutely. But I mean, bear in mind that structural funds, EU structural funds, work that way also, because money is provided by donor countries to develop, say, to build a road in, say, Romania. But one of the conditions of the structural funds is that the contractors who will build that road in Romania must come from, say, Germany. So you will get companies in Germany benefiting. It's we're recycling some of that money back to those businesses in Germany, and also at the same time, as I said, to pay off local politicians as well, because of course the country that is on the receiving end must provide matching funding as well. And this is what this is looking like to me.
Yeah, but then again, then what's the difference from what BRI on the Chinese Belt and Road
Well,
Initiative? No difference. If you have to buy from this one monopoly, then there's no difference at all.
Well, probably that is true. The one thing I would say about the BRI, which I don't want to overstate, because to be straightforward about it, I think it's a very mixed bag of things. Some of the projects seem to be going well, others less so. But at least it's a much more purposeful program. The Chinese identify where they want to build things. They want to build roads. They want to build ports. They want to build railways because they have an overriding plan behind it. It's one partly intended to serve China, and it's also intended undoubtedly to buy them influence. So, of course, if the Egyptians want the capital to move their capital from Cairo and build a new capital somewhere else in Egypt, the Chinese will fund that because that means they could get more influence in Egypt. But it also has a hard power objective, which is to make it possible for the Chinese to integrate countries closer into the Chinese economic system. So it's a more purposeful project than this one is. The only thing this one will achieve is it will make quite a lot of people very wealthy if it's put together, and it might buy votes in the General Assembly of the United Nations. But it's not really a rival to the BRI, not in the way that it's been presented at the moment.
Yeah. One of the problems I have with this, because previous, like what you just talked about Cyprus, about Greece, whenever IMF invests somewhere, like gives a loan to somebody, they have always made like really strong strings attached. They had made, you have to do this, you have to appoint this guy. Like remember Biden calling Ukrainian president to have a prosecutor appointed there, and they used this money, like loans, to pressure the guy into appointing whomever they wanted. And I think like developing countries are probably more happy to work with China because I haven't heard anyone calling somebody, you have to sell your land, you have to sell your companies, you have to appoint the people we like in your politics. Like who's going to work with the West if they're going to behave like that?
Yeah, I agree, absolutely, yes. But, you know, one can be very cynical about these projects. And of course, international affairs, let's be straightforward about it, there's an awful lot of cynicism about this. Countries, power blocks, do go out of their way to buy support. You find this, same thing used to happen during the Cold War, by the way. But we shouldn't take all these claims about it, you know, being a great project to rival the BRI, or you know what's being proposed now. We should look behind the lines. We should look behind the words, and what is being proposed isn't terribly impressive.
Yeah. Is it gonna then result in more inflation then?
Yes, actually, is the short answer. I mean, this is the other thing. I mean, we have one spending program after another, and now we've added yet another one on top of all of those. And you know, it comes to the point where you start to wonder where is the end point? How much money are you going to spend?
It's getting ridiculous. It's getting ridiculous. It's just print. Let's just build a new city. Yeah, just print it. Let's just do this. Just print it. It's just getting ridiculous.
Solve debt problems with more debt. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Actually, one more question to Alex about this colonial pipeline. When the FBI returned money from the crypto money, the Bitcoin that were stolen, do you think it's safe to keep money in Bitcoin still? Because I've seen a lot of commentators now say that basically somehow FBI has cracked this and cryptocurrency is no longer this safe.
Your wallet, your keys. I mean, if you have it in your own wallet and it's under your control, yes, it's not. The FBI didn't break crypto, what these, me and Alexander talked about this, what these pipeline hackers, these masterminds that, hacked this pipeline or whatever they did with this pipeline, they kept the Bitcoin in a server in North California. That right there to me just sounds really, really bizarre, really suspicious right off the bat. So, I mean, they just basically got into a server. Why they didn't take the Bitcoin and move it into their own wallet for their own safekeeping? Well, that's, the $2.3 million question, isn't it? That's a 67 Bitcoin question, because it doesn't make any sense. Why would they go through all this trouble and this huge hacking and this huge manipulation in order to keep a portion of the Bitcoin in a server in North California? I don't know. Someone can try to explain it to me. They didn't really get into a Bitcoin wallet. What they did is they just got into a server and they said, look, here's all this Bitcoin is sitting on this server. Isn't this interesting?
Yeah, but can they do it more than, US controls a lot of, like NSA controls a lot of about internet traffic.
Yeah, well, if you keep your money, whether it's Bitcoin or fiat on some server, or, if you keep it there, if you keep your money, sitting outside on your porch, then yeah, people can take it. But, if you put your money in your pocket or in your wallet, it makes it a little tougher for them to take it. So, I mean, with your Bitcoin, with any cryptocurrency, you put it in your wallet and it's as secure as it gets. It's under your control. You control it, but it has to be it could be a paper wallet, it could be a hardware wallet like a Ledger or a Trezor, but you put it under your own safekeeping. Why you would put it in a server in the country where you committed the crime? I don't get it. That part, no one is explaining that part. No one.
I don't know.
So they didn't break Bitcoin. They just got into a server. That's how I understood it.
Yes, but I mean, US got to made the Swiss banks to open the information they wanted, and they forced there's many times when US got into servers and stuff which they shouldn't be capable of. So
absolutely.
Now, can you keep, how many countries is there where you can really be secure that no one's gonna get there?
No, I mean, they can go into your bank account. That's why you have FACTA, isn't it? If you're an American citizen and you're doing banking outside of the United States, you're living outside the United States. If you want to open up a bank account in London, in Greece, anywhere, and you have an American passport, then that bank is basically opening up your bank account information to the U.S. government. They have to. That's the whole FACTA Act. Is if you're outside of the U.S., then banks have to comply to give your information to the IRS, to the U.S. government. And no bank is exempt. Even banks in Russia are under the FACTA scheme. They've signed up to the FACTA. So if you're an American living in Russia and you open up a bank account, and you open up that bank account with an American passport, that bank is going to share your information, your bank account information, with the U.S. authorities. No other country is like that. No other country's passport is like that. That's why you have a lot of American citizens who are giving up their citizenship. That's when you go to a bank and you open up a bank account. If you have an American passport, many banks kind of look at you and say, "Oh crap! Now I'm going to have to go through all this regulation with this guy to open up his bank account. I'm going to have to open it up to the U.S. and fill out all this paperwork and all this stuff." So yeah, the U.S. makes sure that once you have that citizenship, there's nowhere to run. They're gonna get your information, and they're gonna see how much money you're making, what money you're putting into your bank account, what money needs to get taxed, everything. They've got everything on you.
Yeah,
that's
very worrisome.
That's the IRS. There you go. That's the system.
Strange. Before, banks used to love to have more clients. Nowadays, I mean, it's not the only case. Like, not only US customers are not welcomed. I remember a few years ago there was a big push in Europe because of sanctions against all the Russian clients. Basically, bank felt it was easier to just force the clients go away than to comply with whatever, to check what money have been gotten legally or whatever. So
yeah, banks are making it hard. Even if you want to transfer a couple of thousand euros or dollars from one country to another, Banks are like calling you up now and saying, you know, where's this money going? Who's it for? And you're sitting there saying, what are you talking about? It's my money, and I want to transfer it to this guy. And they're keeping tabs on you. So it's all troubling signs. These are all bad signs when you see this stuff going on. That's my opinion. When you see this type of control going on, it means something bad is on its way in the financial system.
Yes, Big Brother is watching. Okay, yeah. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Costa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Nice talking to you. Take care.
Yeah.
All right, we're bringing our last caller, and it is Tarif, and then we'll get to super chats. We've got a few super chats as well. Good questions in the for the super chats. Tarif.
How y'all doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, man. Thank you for taking our call, man. Good morning. Oh well, I'm in Central Time in the United States, so it's still morning time. Free Julian Assange, free journalism, and West Papua New Guinea. I want to talk about Julian Assange and his parents, you know, but mainly, and also China. Especially, I'm gonna stay on China because lately, stuff been coming to me where dealing with China a lot last week, and I was like, kind of, is this where I'm going? You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be a defense lawyer for China. You know, I'm not trying to be a devil advocate for China because I don't like some of the government policy dealing with the people, but that's their people. But first, okay, let me get back to Julian Assange. His parents in the United States is having a tour. And I called the Fault Lines radio show this morning. And I said that Julian Assange's father and brother, the supporters, they just can't focus on Biden, trying to get Biden to pardon Julian Assange. They just can't. That's a good thing. They're focusing on him. But what they need to do, they have to gain an audience with the congressmen and women, which is 400 and something 30 people. That's a lot of ears. And the senators, they have to go to DC and talk to these people. Then every day they come out and give us a report of who spoke to them, who didn't want to speak to them, who gave them a runaround, so we'll know. Okay? Because to me, I feel to believe it have to be done. They have to sit down. They have to see these people. They have to look at these people in their eyes to try to figure out who's who, who's going to tell them the truth, and who might probably BSing them. You know, so I think it's best to do that. You know, and give reports to us in the world about who's who. Just let's not make this about Biden. You know, let's make it about all of them. Okay, now China. Last week it started. I know I've been covering China every once in a while, but I'm starting to see this policy of the U.S. is showing its hand that their main focus is to stop China, the rise of China, and the second focus is Russia. I was watching this show that just popped up on my recommendations on YouTube called the Geopolitical and Conflict Show. They kind of remind me of y'all. And they say some things I saw like yesterday. I didn't know China and Indonesia was working together more now. Tens of billions of dollars in trade and imports. Indonesia really depends on China. They're working with them economically, massively, with the different departments in Indonesia, and militarily to a certain extent. You know, culturally wise, and all that. I'm like, what? So I mean, when these guys brought it up yesterday, I looked and I found some articles on it. I'm like, wow. So the U.S.
I'm doing live.
The U.S. is, I don't know, the G7 thing is They're late to the ball game. I come to find out that the G7 thing was about basically counteracting China, the Belt and Road Initiative. They talk Macron talking about gold reserves. They should use the gold reserves to get rid of Africa's debt, which is they created by putting these dictators in and having these people to sign these messed up loans, which got Africa in debt. But Bali will bring up reparations, basically, that will take care of the debt if they bring up reparations for Africa. But China's there now. And they just starting to get in a race against China with the Belt and Road Initiative in Russia, talking about getting rid of the debt. But yet nobody's talking about infrastructure and nuclear power, dams, fiber optic cables that Africa needs. 300-ton transformers, step up and step down transformers. That's really, you need the machinery capability of Germany, Russia, China to create those things, right? No, but they're not talking about building ports. They're talking about getting rid of the debt. Okay, get rid of the debt. All right. But China's debt. U.S. talking about $50 billion to counteract China development, how the research and development, right? China been doing this for, decades now. And you're going to start it now, right? 50 billion to 200 billion? Nah, you're late to the game. I watch as many people on YouTube and throughout the internet that have sense. I watch y'all, the Little Roosh crew, Matthew Atwood with the Canadian Patriot Press, him and Anton Shaken. Anton Shaken used to be part of Little Roosh, then he went on his own. I watched Road News. They have their own geopolitical thing. I watched the Vips, Ray McGovern. Then you got Scott Ritter, Fault Lines Radio. You got all these people just to gain knowledge to find out what the heck is going on in the world. And the main focus is China. That's what the U.S. is worrying about. And people in Europe is not stupid. Some European nations need China. They have some of the stuff made in China. They trade with China. That's why they employ the job market. By them trading in China is keeping people fully employed in Europe. These people don't think like Steve Bannon over there, right? To counteract China, Ukrainians and Hungarians, Poland's, and Germans don't think like Steve Bannon and Steve Pachiknik and who else? Mike Pompeo. The NATO, just like I was reading posts on the Sputnik News and this, that, and the other. The NATO was created to counteract Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union ain't there anymore. You have Russia, and Russia had developed itself, right? They're more transformative. They became more republic democracy, right? So even that argument of them trying to push against Russia is falling on deaf ears because Russia is advancing. They're working with China, they're working with Africa and throughout the world. Right? They promote democracy, but not the Western form of democracy. Your what you call it, your George Soros and that other type of guy. I forgot his name. Klaus Schwab. I'm not pronouncing. Yeah, him. That guy is a character. You will own nothing. Nah, buddy. Well, who will own it then? If you won't own, that's another question. But anyway, so the focus is China. They love China and Russia especially in the 90s when Russia was neoliberal. You had Gorbachev, then you had Yeltsin. It was neoliberal. They was selling off different things. China was doing the same thing. Late 80s, there was 87, 89, they had some type of premier that believed in the stature neoliberalism lies. And they ousted him. They put in somebody else in China. and Russia, Putin came to power. So what happened was, yes, the West was working with those two nations, and it was like giving them, especially China, cheap labor jobs, and China started rising, and they changed their policy. China changed their policy. All right, I was watching also while as y'all was speaking. I was watching the South China Morning Post interview. It was a heated debate, and China changed throughout the years. Right, they went from like the one-child policy with the terrorist, the terrible four that was actually destroying China cultural views, and they got overthrown. And Xi Jinping took over, and he wanted a renaissance, right? A true renaissance to bring China in the modern world to looking back into the past at the culture as something that's good too. Take the good qualities of the culture and bring it forward, but at the same time live in the present and move in the future. So it was him that started this. Not him, but it was some other guy. I forgot this other Chinese guy name. So they start bringing into in existence the Lincoln FDR point of view of Chinese society of massive infrastructure projects, massive R&D projects of learning, scientific learning of how to do things, to try to get away from copying. Even though every nation do copy, but to get away from that, to teach the people how to create, right? To be self-sufficient, to create. So they started that process, and they started building and building and building. Like back in the early 2000s, China wasn't a threat too much to the U.S. Not really. You know, it was on the U.S. radar, but over the years with the Belt and Road Initiative, then China became a threat, giving African nations, Southeast nations, low interest loans, they're working forward, then that's when it became really a threat. Trump got in office, Steve Bannon, Mike Pompeo somehow finagle their way in the administration. Trump whole goal was to put pressure on China to open up the doors to sell our goods to them, to balance off the trade deficit, right? Well, hundreds of billion dollars come to us, but only tens of billion dollars going to them in trade. But I said that backwards. But anyway, but Mike Pompeo and Steve Bannon had other goals. Their goals was not to worry about the trade, but to actually stop China altogether. Well, Trump policy, I feel to believe, was to just get China to buy our Chevys and our Fords and Dodgers. We needed to sell more of our product to them than they selling to us. That's what Trump's goal was. Steve Bannon and the rest of his little crew? No, we gotta stop China. Why you gotta stop China? Because they're helping Africa, helping people that's starving in Africa. They're helping out with the new ports being built. You know how important? I didn't know a port is so important for a nation's survival is ridiculous. You can't get food grain and tractor trailers in and concrete and materials to build the plants if you didn't have a port. A port is very important. A power plant, whereas natural gas, coal, hydro, or nuclear power is very important. And now because China's in Africa, now Africa have a little bit more loose. They kind of, they're feeling their britches now. Now they can stand up and speak up openly now to Europe because China is helping them out. It's giving them that leverage. And Russia too. Thank God for Russia for helping out Africa too. So I salute Russians for helping out Africa. So you can see that the hypocrisy in the transatlantic political geopolitics dealing with your Klaus Schwabs and your British Empire and your Macrons in the U.S. You're stopping China because they're helping people. right? You're helping Southeast Asia. They're becoming close with Indonesia. They're working with Malaysia. You know, in the beginning of the year, they signed that document, the ASEAN thing, 15 countries. So the focus on China. I mean, it's like I didn't want it. I didn't know last week that I was going to get to the point where I was going constantly. I'm not trying to defend China, but when you see something that's revealed to you over time, it makes it easier for you to break down what's actually going on in the world. Okay, and right now it's China. They're the ones. Nobody. Russia's second. Okay, Biden not really worried about. He's worrying about Russia to a certain extent, but it's China, man. It is China. It's China. Blinken. His main focus is on China. They're not really worrying about Iran too much because they're playing this with the Brzezinski strategical stress game. Because you had two. You had Henry Kissinger, his view. You had Brzezinski. Brzezinski wanted the U.S. to stay out of the Middle East and to focus on Russia, right? So what Blinken's doing, he's focusing on China, though. You know, they're not worrying about too much the Middle East, but they need to keep the Middle East in turmoil, so it can destroy the Belt and Road Initiative. Because if the Middle East ever gets their self together, which they're starting to get themselves together, then that's competition. That would have competition towards the West, especially the United States. Well, you see the Middle East getting these building buildings and skyscrapers and power plants, and Africa getting themselves together. Even Henry Kissinger said some months ago that China is not the Soviet Union. You gotta play now. You gotta work with them now. But I think the U.S. is slow to the table now. The Britain is slow. This $50 billion for R&D it's not hitting on nothing. The Macron proposing to help out Africa, that's not going to hit on nothing because that's going to come with some type of what you call that. If you sign that contract with Europe and the United States to get those loans to build your infrastructure, then that means you might be becoming under NATO control or something. So you got to be careful. So China's ahead with technologies. They're becoming more and more increasing their distance with technologies. And the U.S. and Europe, different parts of Europe, is not going to catch up. I think it's too late. And they're playing the COVID-19 angle, blame game on China to try to get the world to turn against China, to sue China for trillions of dollars, to take money from out the Belt and Road Initiative and put it somewhere else, right? But I don't think that's going to work because all China got to do is say, you're going to blame us? You got over 200 level 4 chemistry labs in the United States that deal with viruses and diseases. You want us to open up our lab in Wuhan? Open up Fort Detrick. Open up them labs. Who you think the world gonna believe? China?
Okay, let's be careful. Just Tarif, just be a little careful with the.
I'm sorry.
With the words you use.
I'm sorry.
Otherwise, this stream will get pulled. Pulled down.
I'm sorry.
Go on. You
I
were
meant
saying.
to say that the 19. Thank you for stopping me now. But anyway, I'm in a zone right now. I'm like Michael Jordan. I'm in a zone. But anyway, so
let's just not approach that.
China will win the
topic.
Case.
Hello?
Okay.
Yeah, let's just
but
because
anyway,
otherwise, like I said, the stream will get pulled down.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, okay. Oh, okay, I gotta be careful. All right. But anyway, yeah. So the world's waking up. Nigeria got rid of Twitter. They don't want to deal with Twitter no more. We need another platform so we can discuss things like this. Facebook was getting rid of pages of Palestinian protests. I didn't know the guy for Pink Floyd, Roger Waters, had a Palestinian. Somehow on this page on Facebook, they said he had a Palestinian flag or something, and Facebook edited it out of his hands or something. Did some CGI work. I mean, it's getting ridiculous with Facebook and Twitter. I mean, with these offshoots of the CIA, NSA that's actually was using them to overthrow governments, like they was trying to do in Nigeria, but Hori, which is, I'm not trying to defend him, like y'all said last week, you know, he stopped it. He stopped it. You know, and so, but yeah, the focus is on China. I want Julian Assange to be freed. He is so important. he's one of the top pieces on the chessboard, and they're afraid of that man so much. They don't want this man out. They want him to pass, but we can't let this man die in prison. I refuse to. We can't let this man pass away in a prison like they're trying to keep pushing back his dates for the appeals, you know, without convicting him. Nah, man, these countries, more and more countries, got to stand up for this man. Lula, I feel to believe he's gonna win next year. I know he spoke on Julian Assange, but next time when these countries meet for the UN this year, they need to invite Stella Morris or the Shiptons on to talk about Julian Assange. To give him at least 5 minutes so the whole world can see this, man. This U.S. and Britain claim to be the democracy, and you got a journalist in prison for telling on y'all. That's why they got him in prison, for telling on them. No, let's talk about Navalny and Russia and Uyghurs in Western China. But when somebody stand up and tell on them, oh no, he's a bad guy, he's a this and he's a that, and set him up and throw him in prison. Like they did with Craig Moore. They're messing over Dernizer and countless other people in the United States. The United States is a good country. We can do better. We got corrupt people in charge. They need to be exposed. And the man, and what y'all knew he was Julian Assange. That man was exposing them. They don't like that man. So we got to let them know this every single day. Free that man, free Julian Assange, and focus on the Congress and the Senate, what the Shiptons have to do, and supporters to try to get them to pass a bill to reform the Espionage Act and other acts so we can free Julian Assange and pressure Joe Biden and let everybody know this. That's what I keep on doing. Thank you for giving me a chance. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tarif. Free Julian Assange. Thank you very much.
Indeed, absolutely. Can I just say there's been still no decision by the English High Court about whether to consider the appeal the United States is bringing against the decision by Judge Baritza to refuse extradition. We were expecting a decision weeks ago, and we were indeed expecting that there would be a decision by the High Court by now on whether to allow this appeal or not. The fact is the High Court doesn't seem to be able to make up its mind. And the result is that Julian Assange is in limbo. He's been kept in prison in Belmarsh. And there's no bail for him because there's no court any longer that is authorized to grant him bail. So he's kept in prison in Belmarsh with no end in sight to the time when he's going to be in prison. He's no timetable, no specific date when his appeal is due to be heard, and none of us understand what is going on. So it's a very, very serious situation.
All right, let's add one more caller that just came in. Is Muika.
No.
Let's see if you're ready. Thank you, Tarif, for that call. Here is Muika to the stream.
Hey guys, I love the show. I've been following it for some time. You guys are amazing, very, very non-biased analysis of like what's happening in the world. I'd like to start with a quote about China and America. The business of America is war, and the business of China is business. And it's kind of every day as that passes by, we kind of see it becoming true and true and true. There was another quote by an American movie producer who said, China is quickly becoming what we imagine ourselves to be. And for us Americans, this is very threatening. Like China, what it's doing in the world, helping develop nations. This is exactly how America imagines themselves. Like, we're this great country on top of the hill, like so much good things happening to us. But actually, in reality, it's like China that kind of seems to be doing the good things in the world rather than America. In fact, there's a stat: China has not been in a single war in the last 40 years, but America, NATO, constantly bombing countries for God knows what. Also, I want to talk about like democracy and what it means. Like democracy, the dictionary definition of democracy is like a system of government that represents the people, basically a government for the people, by the people. And I don't know, recently I'm questioning whether elections is the best way to produce democracy. Like what you see in this Western systems, there's supposedly multi-party systems, but it's kind of just ends up being two parties, one on the right, one on the left, and really both of them are just corporate parties, aren't they? Like they're just parties for, if you have money, that's where you get the power, rather than working for the people, like the people's interests. That's what they should be doing. And when I compare this with China, you kind of see like they just recently completely elevated poverty, and you're like, wow, this is good. This is very good for the people of China. And there's a problem in the sense that Western media kind of, when they talk about China, it's a threat, it's this evil thing. But actually, they've done so much good for their people and for the world. But the media, who are supposed to be like the carriers of truth, they don't report this. I don't know if it's because they're getting talking points from their government or what, but it's just not right. Especially since when China was growing, the CCP was sending people to America, sending people to all these different countries to learn. For example, the current chairman, President Xi, he went to Arizona, stayed there for a couple of days, learn how they're doing their farming there. Like, why? What's the problem with I don't know, with learning from China? Like with all they're doing, they have great technology. With how they, like, for example, mining, when they finish mining, they grow plants there so that it doesn't harm the environment. Or like with the solar or like electric cars, what's the problem with learning from them? Or how they build architecture? What's the problem? There's no problem. It's just like I don't know, something. I think it's maybe corruption or like exceptionalism, like oh yeah, we like the center of the world, we represent everything. And there's I don't know, almost cocky ideology in the West where we can't learn anything from this system. There's in the West you hear a lot that, oh, the Chinese people are okay, but the CCP is what is a problem. But this kind of logic isn't that the kind of logic that led to, I don't know, bombing of Libya, bombing of Syria? Like, oh, the Syrian people are okay, but it's Assad that's the problem. Oh, it's Gaddafi that's the problem, but the Libyan people are okay. But oh, it's I don't know, the party in Cuba that's the problem, rather than but the people are okay. And they use this logic to go there, and the people who end up suffering is the people they're trying to save. like the actual citizens of those countries rather than the the officials. So yeah, I guess my question is, will democracy as it is understood today in the West, will it need to change, for that, so that it can bring back hope to the people? Because right now there's a lot of like despair and hope with everything, and it's like the system the way it is, it's just like it's like eating itself and nothing, and it kind of, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Like the right and the left, they seem to never agree on anything and except the enemy. This kind of, it's a little worrying because it kind of might lead to a war. So is a reform possible in the West at all? And can democracy lead to peace in the world, progress, and cooperation?
Alexander?
Yeah, well,
is there a need for democracy? I guess it's a question
I am a convinced Democrat. Does it work? I think so. But I mean, the problem is that democracy is being undermined practically everywhere, as far as I can see, most especially in the West. And an earlier answer to one of Tarif's questions, you had to interrupt Tarif and stop him making certain comments, because you said that if he continued, there would be problems with this broadcast. Well, that doesn't happen in a democracy, or at least not in the kind of democracy that I used to remember. So, of course, democracy works. Democracy has worked in many places and in many countries. Worked in the United States, it's worked in Britain, but it is being eroded away. And that is the reality of the times that we live in today. And, of course, democracy works. But the other thing to say is we're not here to crusade for it or to expand it or to force it on other people, because when we do, then it's not democracy anymore, because democracy is a system built on accountability and consent.
Yeah, that's great. A great system of democracy in Switzerland, where whenever there's a big decision, they vote on the issue. It's not like just a debate. They vote on. That's a kind of democracy that works, and you quickly move away from it rather than, I don't know, voting for ideology, because all they do is just produce like rhetorics rather than actual policy, because they never agree on anything at all. Also, another thing I wanted to comment on is about free markets, and like how the West says, okay, we stand for free markets and all this, but actually, if you look at the West, there's a lot of monopolies, like because of these corporations and I guess lobbying. I think lobbying is kind of just corruption, glorified corruption. You pay somebody some money directly or indirectly, then they pass policies and laws that favor you and your organization and your people. So it's through this lobbying. I think lobbying might be one of the worst things in the West, because it just produces monopolies, and other competitors can't compete. So it ends up being rather than democracy, it ends up being like an aristocracy, where like just a few people like control everything, and it's the people with the money, like through, I don't know, through their lobby groups, through World Economic Forum, where these people meet and then they set their grand plans for the world, or even the G7. And these people, rather than working for, the average Americans, average Brits, they're not doing that. They're just working for the interests of a small percentage of people. And people are getting angry. And the media is, in a way, it's directing this anger towards different groups rather than what's really the source of this problem. Why is somebody doubling or tripling their wealth in the worst pandemic, in the worst thing that's happened in recent history, and people are getting and profiting off of this? That's just not right. And that's where the anger should be, rather than all this, I don't know, this theories, or I don't know, critical race or whatever. That's just a distraction, I think, right, from the real cause of the anger.
Well, I'm absolutely sure you're right, but of course, it comes back to your earlier question about democracy, because of course, if there was a functioning democracy, we would be talking about the serious issues, not be distracted by invented ones. But so, I mean, all of these things are interconnected. I mean, in a functioning democracy, oligarchs, financial technology oligarchs, and all the other kinds of oligarchs would not exist. The two, oligarchy and democracy, are incompatible with each other.
Yeah, so true, so true. I don't know what's going to happen with Maxim Robespierre. Another question, I guess it's to do with NATO. Has it outlived its usefulness? Like when those started, it was about containing the Soviet Union, but now like they don't know what they're doing. They're talking about climate change. They're talking about China. They're talking about all these different things. That's, I don't know.
Well, it's not just outlived its usefulness, it's become a problem. It's becoming an ever-growing problem, because you have a military alliance which has been created, and it's constantly looking for something to do. And of course, if he talks about climate change, that's bad. And if he talks about other things, you know, of an economic nature, if you like, that's bad also. But the nature of alliances is that they tend to become defined, or rather they define themselves by their enemies. So an alliance which doesn't have an enemy is always on the lookout for one. And it is creating, as a result, problems with other countries, where, like Russia, where it might not have those problems, where there might not be those problems if it does not exist. And of course, the same thing is doing all around the world, because of course it was supposed to be defending the North Atlantic region from Soviet expansionism, and now it's become involved in wars in places like Libya, Afghanistan, and wherever. And we even have situations where we see NATO fleets, as they're so called, now floating around in the Pacific, far away from any conceivable North Atlantic situation. So it's not just outlived its usefulness, it's become a force for destabilization and conflict and instability and war.
Yeah, so true. It's really sad. And Russia has been restraining themselves like over the last few years. Like they're getting constantly, it's propaganda really, like Russia Gate, like all this, oh, Russia this, anything that's happening, it's Russia's fault, or China or anything. And Russia's been restraining itself so much because, you know, in Russian culture, they lost a lot during the war, and it's kind of still fresh in the national consciousness. And that's why they've been restraining themselves. But after they saw how China quickly responded with the counter sanctions, I think from now on Russia won't be taking this illegal sanctions sitting down.
Well, I mean, bear something in mind. Russia is a much less powerful country than China or the United States is. So if it has had to act with restraint, it's because of the reality of power, the realities of power. I mean, the United States can impose sanctions on Russia, and those sanctions have effect. If Russia imposes sanctions on the United States, well, those are simply non-effective. I mean, they have no real meaning. So that, in effect, forced the Russians to act in a more restrained way, because they were playing with weaker cards. But I think what we have seen over the last 7 years, since the real crisis in East-West relations, in Russian-US relations began, is that the Russian cards have steadily grown stronger and the US cards have steadily grown weaker. And not only is Russia today stronger in relation to the US because its economy is better organized and its military is much better organized than it was, but of course it now has an ally, and that ally is China, and that ally gives China leverage which Russia before didn't have. Back in 2014, the Russians couldn't be sure that the Chinese would be at their back if they got into a confrontation with the West. So that is the change in the dynamic that you see. And of course, it is changing the political weather all the time.
Yeah, that's great. But another thing I also wonder, why, like the Western media, why don't they hold their governments accountable? We have the UN Charter, like they break a lot of international laws. They talk about this norms, like what are they? There's protocols that they don't follow. And the media just kind of goes along with it, and it can play a part in like holding these governments accountable.
Well, of course it can. That's its function. That's why it gets protections. The media gets protections under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It is an essential. A free media is essential in a democracy. But going back to the early parts of our discussion, the point is that democracy is being eroded. So the media isn't working like that anymore. It's no longer functioning in the way that it used to do. And far from becoming a institution which held power to account, it has now become the handmaid of power. And that is a very disturbing thing. Now, we in our little channel and other independent media that, like us, try to fill that space, and of course we run into many problems as a result.
Yeah, they're trying to take silence all the voices, but I think it's because the biggest threat to democracy and freedom is lobbying and these groups, because now they're just passing policies for their friends rather than what's good for the country, rather than what uplifts people. In the UN Charter, Section 12, the basic human right is the right to food, shelter, clothing, and access to medical health care. But I guess for this supposedly liberal democracies, so long as you have free speech, you can be hungry, homeless, but you have all the rights that you need, rather than the most basic ones.
Profoundly true. Absolutely so. Entirely right.
All right, thank you guys. I really enjoy watching your channel.
Thank you, Mika. Thank you. Take care. All right, Alexander.
Super chats?
Yeah, let's do some super chats. Thank you to Zariel. Thank you to GEC. Thank you to Valley S for helping us moderating, keeping everything moving and flowing. And GEC, I know you said that it's late in Australia. Thank you. Thank you for staying up late. We really appreciate it. Let's see. We'll wrap it up with some super chats. Raphael Lingode, $4.99 super chat. Thank you very much, Raphael. Before I forget, Teodoro sent some super stickers, and then he threw his chat in here in the live streams chat, so I don't lose my place. Let me get to that one as well, which is what's going to happen to Netanyahu that now he's removed from power? What is the future of Israel?
Very good question. I mean, I don't. I mean, first of all, it's not possible to say with any certainty. I mean, he remains a major political giant, political force in Israel, regardless of what your feelings are about him. And my feelings, by the way, are predominantly negative about him. I've never liked him, but irrespective of that, you have to face the reality that he's dominated in Israeli politics for decades. So he's still there, but of course he faces court cases which could go badly for him, and could go very badly. He could go to prison. It's conceivable. And of course, the government that's been put together is a very fragile one. So from the other perspective, it could fall apart and he could be back in power very soon. I am not sure. My sense, and this is only a gut feeling, is that this is probably Netanyahu's the end of his period of dominance. I mean, even if he were to become prime minister again, which I think is unlikely, personally, I think the spell that he has cast is broken. And we're going to see a situation in Israel of increasing instability, with no figure as strong as Netanyahu taking his place, and a succession of weak prime ministers, perhaps making mistakes in the Middle East, perhaps feeling that they need to show or prove themselves in a way that Netanyahu did not need to do. And therefore, we could end up seeing the situation in the Middle East become more dangerous. That's my fear anyway. Now, I may be wrong, and I'm not, in a position to predict anything, but that's what my concern is.
All right. Thank you for those super stickers. From Ernesto Cardenas also sent us a super sticker. Rainy Steps sent us a super chat, $3.99. Says, Alex, wake up. Teodoro's super chat was $9.99. Thank you very much for that. Ken Barber, $4.99. The divine purpose of the religions and governments of this world is to fail and demonstrate that without God, we are legends in our own minds. That is the super chat there. Thank you for that, Ken. Who was it? Yes, Ken Barber. Thank you for that super chat. From Hunger. The difference between the left then and now is this. Before it was a struggle for power, but now they're a hegemon. That's why a green can wear a flak jacket and progressives support the CIA war in Syria. Excellent point.
Absolutely excellent.
Very
point.
true.
Very true.
Very true. Very true there. From Ken Barber, $4.99 super chat, and then another $4.99 super chat. Learning for the super chat. The G7 are a bunch of wankers. Yes, W with the anchor there. That's awesome. Do you agree? And thanks for all you do.
Yes. Well, I mean, I would choose a different word, but in essence, yes, I agree.
Yes, very creative way to spell that as well. From Magnesia Shan, 100 ZAR super chat. When the Biden bubble goes bust and the green economy is sought out, what rights do the U.S. have firing ammunitions over foreign continents?
Well, I don't think they have any right to do it even now, but you're quite right. When things do go bust, when we have a crisis, one does wonder what will happen, because at that point, of course, things will become very difficult. I mean, it's paradoxical that all this acceleration in money printing, or this attempt to goose up GDP, to propel forward economic growth, is intended to make the US stronger. And of course, it will end up making the US weaker. And then when it becomes weaker, how will it respond? Will it become more aggressive, more belligerent, more confrontational, or will it become less? I think this is the big question. And it's the big question Americans need to ask themselves too, because, they've got, it seems to me, to get through this bubble, which is inevitable, but then they're going to have very important and very difficult decisions to make.
All right. From Sparky, $5 super chat. How did Macron not know Northern Ireland is part of the UK? Could there be other globalists in positions of power who don't know basic facts?
Macron is one of these people who just cannot resist making a clever comment as he sees it, which runs into trouble. Now, the reason that he said that is because, of course, the official name of the United Kingdom is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And Great Britain, of course, is the island of Britain, which is made up of three kingdoms, Scotland, England, and Wales. Wales isn't technically a kingdom, it's a principality, but never mind. And Northern Ireland is part of a different island, which is the island of Ireland. So he thought that he was making this very clever quip in response to Johnson's point about, how would you feel the sausages had to go through restrictions if they transferred from Toulouse to Paris. And of course, what he did instead, by casting doubt on the territorial integrity of the United Kingdom, is he caused massive offense amongst the British. Macron does this all the time. He thinks he's cleverer than he really is. He comes up with these clever comments, and all they do is that they offend and antagonize people, and they make them angry. But he can't resist doing it because his vanity always blinds him to the danger of what he's up to.
All right. From 1976, $5 super chat. Predictions for the longevity and long-term effects of critical race theory on society and politics, USA and abroad.
Well, I mean, to straightforwardly, I mean, it is something which is bound in the end to be discredited, completely discredited, but it has enormous ability to do immense damage in the meantime. Now, how long it will continue for, that I am not going to predict, because when I find myself confronted by something which, to be straightforward about this, I find completely bizarre, I find it very difficult to believe that something so bizarre can survive for any time at all. But the fact is, I suspect it will continue for a while because it is useful to so many people. But how long that will be, I'm not going to try to guess. Eventually, as I said, it will be discredited, and we will start to talk about real issues and real concerns, including the very real issues that exist within the United States about, discrimination and all that. But how long? But in the meantime, it will cause enormous damage, and especially within the educational system.
All right. From Mark Hewitt, £5 super chat. If the EU does destabilize Northern Ireland, why do they think that there will be no consequences for them, such as loyalist bomb exploding in Barlymont?
Well, I hope not. I hope we don't get to that. But can I just say straight away, why do they not think that it will extend to them? Because they never do. They never thought that the situation in Ukraine would turn out as it has. They always assume that in the end they will be able to control things, and then they become very angry and very upset when it turns out that they can't control things, and then they just do the same thing all over again, because that is the nature of this institution and of the people who are attracted to it.
All right, thank you for that super chat, Mark. From Marley Bedford, $22 super chat. If Russia had won in Afghanistan, do you think the situation would have been different or just ongoing? So is Russia stepping back? In now other words, forces are exiting. I have heard they may.
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, in terms of the Russians winning in Afghanistan, I mean, I think this is a misunderstanding of what happened in the 80s. I mean, I don't think there was any possibility of them winning in that sort of way. When they did quit Afghanistan in 1989, they did leave a viable government behind them, and there was an agreement that had been hammered out in Geneva, whereby the US and Pakistan committed themselves to not sending troops to support the Mujahideen. And had that agreement been abided by, it's just possible that that government might have stabilized, in which case we might have seen a peaceful Afghanistan, and many of the problems we've had since might have gone away. Well, that agreement was not abided by. The moment the Soviet troops left, the United States and Pakistan went back on the agreement and started funneling more arms to the Mujahideen, with the consequences that we all know. Now, what will happen in Afghanistan in the future? Again, I am not sure. I can't be certain about this, but I'm going to make a couple of predictions. Firstly, I think the Taliban will win, and I think there will be a new government led by the Taliban in Kabul. I think this is a different Taliban from the one which existed in the 1990s. I think it will make a serious effort to engage the neighboring powers, Pakistan, China, Iran, Russia, and I think that it will be a more conventional government than the one that existed before. And if I am right about that, and that's, I accept, more hope than an analysis based on experience, then I think that all countries should just leave Afghanistan alone and give this country the space in which it can sort itself out.
All right. From Asavet MD, $20 super chat. 3 more days to go in Joe's marathon journey. Will he make it?
Well, good question. Following his press conference, I wouldn't put money on it.
No, they'll drag him over the finish line.
They'll drag him over. I suppose they will, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Asavet MD. It's going to be fun watching. From Rocky Looks, $20 super chat. I read 2014 an online Dutch air safety report, which stated that Buk missiles in the Donbass were Ukrainian, and the rebels had only man-pack missiles, which didn't threaten air safety. Do you guys know, or have you seen this report?
I've not only read it. I mean, it's the Dutch Safety Board report. I not only read it, I did a big analysis and discussion of it at the time. And in fact, what you're referring to is that Western intelligence agencies at the time actually made that report. They said that there was no evidence that the militias in eastern Ukraine were in possession of Buk missiles or heavy advanced missiles at that time, as far as they knew. So that's what that Dutch Safety Board report says. It does not refer to the presence of Ukrainian missile systems in eastern Ukraine, at least not to my knowledge, but that has, as I understand it, been independently corroborated from other sources. In fact, I've heard that Ukrainian television at the time was actually showing pictures of Ukrainian missile systems being deployed in eastern Ukraine. So I don't think there's any doubt that the Ukrainian missile systems were there. And it is a fact that the intelligence agencies of the West at that time were reporting that the militias of the eastern Ukraine did not have such systems. And it's all in the Dutch Safety Board report, which people need to read. But of course, I want to stress that was written then. There's an awful lot more evidence now. There is a trial underway at the moment in, I think, The Hague, certainly in the Netherlands. The evidence that's coming out is, to put it mildly, sketchy and unconvincing. But I will continue to follow this trial closely and see whether we get any more evidence over the course of it.
All right. From Kurt Fram, 10 CHF Super Chat. Why do you think that Putin allows Biden to hide behind a solo press conference after this summit? Wouldn't it be a good chance to level the playing field after being constantly vilified for many years?
Well, it's not Putin's decision, it's Biden's decision. So, I mean, Putin can't force Biden to attend a joint press conference. I'd make one observation, by the way. Putin was not only willing to attend a joint press conference, but he's actually conducted an interview with NBC. I mean, he's actually met the US media and fielded very, very aggressive and hostile questions from a US journalist. Biden does not meet with the Russian media. He does not attend press conferences. He does not accept tough and hostile questions from foreign media like that in Russia. So there you see the difference.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words.
No,
Trump
no.
and Putin did hold
Absolutely.
a conference together, standing
Absolutely.
both of them
Absolutely.
together at the podiums, and they fielded both very tough questions. And Trump took a lot of media beating for it, but he stood there and he took those questions, as did Putin. What does it tell you that Biden doesn't stand next to Putin and take questions?
Absolutely, and as I said, it says a huge amount, but as I said, if he wanted to address the Russian people directly, he could have taken. I'm sure there would have been Russian TV stations which would have been happy to interview him too. Yeah. But of course,
a real leader, a real president would stand next to his counterpart, and they would take questions together. That's what a real leader and a real president would do. That's what Trump did.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. A real president doesn't duck and hide.
No, I agree.
From Otnosens, the only chance to escape deadly embraces like the EU is to have any treaty, including of association, limited in time, renewable but time limited. Interesting.
I completely agree. That's a very good point, actually. I never thought of that, but you're absolutely right. Because, as I said, otherwise, well, you get caught in a trap, and there's no escape from it.
Yeah. Excellent super chat there. Raul Pinto, Netanyahu ousted after 12 years. Any thoughts of the new PM, Naftali Bennett, especially with regards to Palestine?
Well, I mean, he seems to be, if anything, even more hardline on these issues than Netanyahu was. Now, whether at the same time, it's point point to remember about him is that he leads a very unstable government with, supported by an Arab party, supported by left-wing parties. The only thing that holds this government together is its hostility to Netanyahu. With Netanyahu likely out of the way, one wonders how long it will remain in control. But if you're talking about the Prime Minister himself, Mr. Bennett doesn't seem to me at all like the kind of person who's going to make any kind of concessions of substance, be it on Palestine, on any other issue at all.
All right. From Heyman, 699 super chat. In China, the political class have too much power. In the U.S., the corporate class have too much power. Thank you to both. You offer tremendous value.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment, actually. It's a very, very astute way of putting it, actually.
All right. Super chat from Amit 100 and Nimiyar. The last post-war major European, Brit including, leader to cause great problems to the USA was Bettino Craxi, Sigonelli crisis. No one else.
Well, I'm not able to discuss that because I'm not, I don't have the knowledge of it. But Craxi, all I'll say about him is this. I mean, I do remember Craxi very well, and he was an exceptionally clever man. I mean, wherever else he was, I've heard that he was very corrupt and that he had all kinds of strange connections to all sorts of people, but that he was undoubtedly an extremely clever political operator. And if he did make trouble for the US, well, perhaps he did. I mean, but I can't talk about that because I don't know about it.
All right, thank you for that. Super chat from Simon Ennifer. Thanks, CCP, for joining the stream. I hope you can survive the coming blockade. Great show, guys. Update your cybersecurity. You are on the radar.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we are. Oh, I hope we're not on the radar. All right. Thank you very much, Simon, for that. From Radi Gessen, what role do you think Moldova and Transnistria will play strategically within the next 10 years? Thanks.
That's a huge question, actually. I think that this has to be understood within the context of the overriding crisis in Ukraine, in the sense that there's a push-pull with Moldova. Moldova is a very divided society in the sense that, as I understand it, most people who actually live in Moldova, not just in Transnistria, but in Moldova themselves, Moldova itself, would like to see a closer alignment with Russia, but that there is a very, very strong diaspora, Moldovan diaspora, which has the right to vote in Moldovan elections and which wants to pull it more towards the West. And so the country is being pulled in these two different directions, and it's still not clear which way it will go. But I think ultimately Moldova in and of itself is not important enough to cause a huge crisis. And I don't think the West wants to create a crisis in Transnistria at the moment, given all the other crises that exist with Russia. So in the end, it's Ukraine we should focus on.
All right. From Simon, is the anti-Russian attitude of Western media, politicians, a clever plot by Chinese actors to keep Russia in its China alliance?
Well, I mean, some people, one does wonder. I remember reading years ago a comment by Anatol Lieven, who is one of the most astute commentators on international politics. He did wonder, actually, whether perhaps US foreign ministries might have been infiltrated by agents of Beijing, because what they were doing in running this anti-Russian foreign policy was so much in China's interests that you could almost have designed it, if you'd been a Chinese, to achieve that purpose. So who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Very interesting. From Ben Heiss, what is the political situation between North and South Korea? Maybe they could unite and elect a king or something.
A king? Well, I think that's not going to happen. To be realistic about this, I mean, but at the moment it's very bad. I mean, the North Koreans and the South Koreans are trading insults, and North Korea's broken off contacts with South Korea, and there's a lot of that going on. But I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I mean, South Korea seems to be maneuvering itself into a more independent position from the US, and given how high the stakes are in the Korean Peninsula, and given how strong the sentiment is in Korea amongst the Korean people, both North and South, to reunite, I would not be surprised if the South Koreans and the North Koreans come to some kind of an arrangement between themselves, which would see the Americans leave the Korean Peninsula and some kind of economic and political contacts to be established between the two Koreas. Outright union, I don't think, is on the agenda for the moment.
All right. And the final super chat, is this the bread and circus act of empire in decline? It looks like our own leaders are pillaging within to bribe the barbarians at the gate. That's from Indigo Jones.
Absolutely. And that's a very good one, actually. And I think that may be right. And I mean, there is a sense, there is a kind of frantic sense to a lot of this, a sort of fever that there has sort of evolved, especially I think in the US, actually, among some people in the US, that they've got to do things very fast because time is running out. By the way, I don't think it is. That's the paradox of it. I don't think, if you look at this, I don't think the US in reality is living in any kind of danger except what it makes for itself. I mean, I truly believe that, but one does almost get the sense sometimes that we are in an end of empire type situation, and if Americans would just listen to my advice, put the empire aside, forget it. It doesn't help you at all. The British found when they got rid of their empire that it was liberating, and the Americans will find the same.
All right. I think that's everything.
Yeah.
Let me just do one more quick check. Any final thoughts, Alexander, as I do a quick check of the...
We're going to have a very exciting and interesting week this week, because obviously we have the Biden roadshow moving to Brussels, and then it goes on for its star turn in Geneva, and we'll see how that turns out. I am really worried that there's going to be another debacle in Brussels, in Geneva. I really am. I think that the Americans are woefully unprepared. I don't think they really understand what the Russians are looking for, and I think it's going to turn out very badly. And in fact, so far from making things better internationally, it could end up making things worse.
Yeah, I agree with that. From Amit, 2 super chats that came in. Amit says, Japan was a nation that was under attack by the U.S. for increasing its economic size. Plaza Accord, 1980.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely, actually. I think that what happened was that Japan's economy was growing very fast and very strongly, and the Americans persuaded and put pressure on the Japanese to do all sorts of things with the yen, and Japan has never really recovered since then. That's certainly how it looks to me, which is not to say, by the way, that there weren't many things going wrong in Japan itself. I mean, the Japanese were over-investing, and they were getting their investment program out of control.
All right, from Sparky, final super chat. So Macron was attempting a joke but didn't care. The world audience wouldn't get the reference. Did Boris Johnson get the joke, or did it fall flat?
Well, it didn't just fall flat. It provoked him. It made him very, very angry. He got it, absolutely. He understood exactly what Macron was up to. I mean, bear in mind, Johnson, whatever else he is, he's a very sophisticated character. He knows France. He knows French. I mean, he's worked in Europe. He has a understanding of, he has a better understanding of Macron than Macron does of him. And it was, as I said, it was a clever quip that Macron made, which has backfired horribly. And Macron does this all the time, by the way. This isn't the first time he does that. I remember there was a meeting he had with Putin just after he became president, when Putin came to France and Macron toured him around Versailles, and he was making one comment after another, which I could tell was annoying Putin intensely. That's the kind of man Macron is.
Yeah. All right. We'll end this live stream there, on that note, thank you, everybody. Thank you to Zarael. Thank you to GEC. Thank you to Valies for moderating. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for helping out. Thank you to everyone that sent us super chats. Great questions. We really appreciate your support, everyone in the live stream. Thank you very much. Hit that like, guys, on your way out. To all the callers, thank you as well for all your great calls. Alexander, thank you. We have an interesting week ahead, guys. We will we'll keep you posted.
We certainly do. We live in interesting times, as the Chinese like to say.
Yes, we do. Let's see what happens. Let's see how everything plays out. All right, guys, we'll leave it there. Have a great Monday.